So, hey everyone. I am here again, once again, with my good friend Alison McDowell. And basically, Alison asked if we would do this show. And Alison, you want to just kind of explain why are we here today?
Why are we here today? Okay, well, we're here today because most people who've been following my work over the last, we're rounding out on maybe 2 years now, probably already know that my focus has been around human capital finance, particularly tied to children and vulnerable communities, the poor, the disabled, refugees, that sort of thing. And so, I came into all of the lockdowns and everything with that lens. And integral to that was the human capital finance piece, and major part of that infrastructure that was going to allow the human capital finance part to happen across the education space and the health space and the housing space and the mental health space and the addiction space and the elder care space. All of these spaces is blockchain identity, or sometimes they call it self-sovereign digital identity in the Metaverse. And now I've been talking about the Metaverse for probably 18 months, and I think people are kind of getting a handle on it more or less. And so we're going to go into it a little bit. Actually, I have like 60 slides, so I have a lot of slides. But I just sort of want to frame this out as, for me, I feel a responsibility as a person who can see how this machine is going to operate, and someone who lives in the city of Philadelphia, where a lot of these financial products and now technology products and biotechnology projects are being developed, right? And so as a good citizen, when you see something bad about to happen to other people, you try to alert them. And, certainly the only thing that I can be accountable for is my own behavior, just as like each of us is only accountable for our own behavior and our own choices. And some people out there may sort of feel like, well, my choices don't have any consequence. I'm such a small drop in this giant pond. And so I'm just going to sort of get by and do my thing. And, I'm not judging people for that. I'm just saying my role in this drama that is unfolding, I feel, is different. And so I am trying to sort of hold up a light, give a warning, and make things clear for people, because I think in the resistance space, this coming year, there's going to be a lot of revelations as far as the nature of the leadership of the resistance and the value systems that are being held. And it's not a monolithic entity by any means. It's not homogenous. We have different ideas about things. And I think, a lot of people call me divisive, or that I'm breaking up the unity. And I would say I haven't ever been in anybody's movement, and I'm here for clarity. So if that's not anything you're interested in, feel free to turn me off. You don't have to listen, but I'm going to do my thing. And so the reason I'm here today specifically is, about a month ago, early December, I came across some information about Glenn Greenwald, the journalist based in Brazil, working with Jack Dorsey of Twitter on funding recreation centers in the favelas in Rio de Janeiro. And right off the bat, I'm like, I know what that's about. That's about the Heckman equation. That's about getting data off of these poor kids and setting up these impact markets. And so I need to share my perspective as a Philadelphian, someone who's seen these impact investors go into recreation centers, what's really happening. And then weirdly, over the course of the month of December, that what was meant to be a small project evolved into a 50-page single space paper. And I'm not even done yet. I still have to do a lot around conditional cash transfers. So that was my December. And so I'm immersed in all of this. And, I don't spend a lot of time watching other people's content. Believe it or not, I'm sort of busy with my own channels of research. But someone had shared to me an interview that Derek Rose did with Katherine Fitz. And, sometimes the universe just delivers you information and says, ding, ding, you need to pay attention to this. And granted, it was in the context of maybe a little bit over an hour interview, but there was about a minute or two in there where Derek, in his conversation with Katherine Fitz, was saying, essentially, I'm so glad we're having this measured conversation about blockchain, because it's not black and white. And there are some things that could be bad about blockchain, but there could be some things that are very liberating. And within the context of that clip, and I have it, we'll share it, he mentioned, for example, gaming platforms, and that there were new forms of these gaming platforms where children especially poor children. He felt that it was a better option than begging to play these video games and better, these villages that are very poor, that the children could get together and play these games and raise money for their families. And so that was what he was asserting. And immediately, like, alarm bells came off, because I know that this play to earn program is actually out of the World Economic Forum. Whether or not Derek is fully aware of that's where it comes from. And the blockchain crypto gaming is sort of this backdoor entry of getting people onto blockchain and setting them up as these impact investments. So I pulled that clip, and I shared it. I shared the clip with the original context, but I said, this is where this fits in. And because a lot of what I was seeing actually in the work I was doing, researching Rio de Janeiro, were impact investors going into the favelas and offering young people, more like young teens, early 20s, a universal basic income, and setting themselves up with a psychologist and a trainer to do video gaming and run streaming video game channels as their options. And, have a lot of concerns both about the nature of these digital spaces, in terms of our social connection. To me, it seems somewhat antithetical to the brand of the Freedom Cell movement that Derek and John Bush represent, that it would be digital, because a lot of what I assume most people who are connected with that movement are connected to things like Back to the Land and resilience and things that are in the real world, not the metaverse. So there was sort of a disconnect. And I wrote a blog piece about it. And I shared, it elicited a rather strong response, shall I say. And my entire framing of this afternoon, this presentation we're doing, it's not about personalities, folks. I mean, it is about personalities to the extent that around the issue of child digital labor, for me, and the idea that children can be sovereign, self-owning beings, which are sort of the crux of what Derek is asserting. That's a very particular worldview, especially as regards to what is advancing with global free market trade, this next phase of globalization that Richard Baldwin talks about. It's a very serious thing, and it's something that we should all be giving very careful consideration to. And I am particularly primed in looking at that because I came in the door of looking at blockchain identity as an impact market. Most other people came in the door of, I'm trying to preserve my independent wealth. I'm trying to take care of my family. I'm trying to look for alternatives. I'm scared, all of which I fully understand. But I think in this moment, we need to understand that it's not just, the blockchain isn't just about these medical passporting systems. It's a much larger program. And we need to be very clear if we are the movements, and I'm not in anybody's movement, but the people with whom we align are these people who feel like my imperative is to take care of my immediate circle in the ways I feel is best, without consequence to the way in which my behavior may impact vulnerable communities in other places, there's probably another group that's saying, this is so big, but this is actually a spiritual engagement. This is an engagement of heart and spirit. And if we turn inward and aren't willing to look at the true nature of the brutality of this machine, which I feel is really largely late stage, militarized capitalism, creating this manifest destiny into the metaverse, then what are we doing here? And so there's two courses, right? And I would say, I'm not trying to throw shade on which you choose. I mean, I would align more because of, my life circumstances with, we need to stand up to this machine, and others may feel differently, but we need clarity. And there's a lot of confusion right now in the resistance community about many, many things. And so in striving to bring clarity to this issue around digital child labor and child self-ownership in the metaverse, I took the opportunity. John Bush and Derek Brose are hosting their Greater Reset 3 later this month, and they have over 30 speakers lined up. And so I knitted together documentation based on the clip that I had, and then exchanges, some of which, Jason, you had on social media with Derek directly, and some of which were forwarded to me for other people, that were documented, again, with his name and with his position, to sort of lay out the origins of his position, to clarify his position, and then also to look more closely into the gaming platform that appears to be being piloted in Morelia, Mexico by one of his colleagues named Kenny, and that is Splinterlands. And so I packaged that in sort of a pithy email, and people may argue with to say maybe I should not be so blunt, but for me, it's very clear. You support the idea of child labor, if it's gaming or digital or what have you, or you think that's actually a really bad idea. If we're going to draw a line, I think I tweeted out, I said, maybe you can say there's nuance in deciding about the ethics of a Rockfin account or the ethics of sustainable behavior tokens, or the nuance around the attention economy in blockchain media. Like some of those things, I could say, yeah, at this stage of the game, you could say that there's nuance. Like maybe some people go one way or the other. But for me, children, particularly vulnerable children, that was the line. And so I sent an email to as many of the speakers that I could find contact information for, just to say, listen, I'm going to talk about this. And I think you need to know I'm going to talk about it in the context of this event. And you should really think carefully about what this means and figure out where you're at in this. And I'm going to presume that if you proceed with the event, that at least tacitly, you're going to go along with that, right? Because if we're actually not going to stand in the way of digital labor for children, and we're going to say that that's okay, that's a pretty profound statement, and it's one that people can certainly make. But I just wanted to be very clear that was how I was going to talk about it. Now, I'm not the authority on everything. One voice. I'm just a mom in Philadelphia saying, this is my line, and I'd like to know where you stand in relation to this line. At this point, it's 29 people, just so I can be clear, because a lot of these people are actually pretty high level in these various communities: resistance, wellness, finance, crypto, these different things. And I thought it's only fair. And so I sent that out. And people are upset. But I think there's a sense that this is personal. And what I'm saying is it's actually really, really serious. And it's not something I do in a frivolous way. I'm asserting this because it's time that we have clarity around what is the future that we're building. So anyway, Jason, yeah, I have about 60 slides to sort of walk through that sort of touch on these various elements and things to think about. And I'll probably be doing, we've had some exchanges, so I have a few updates since I initially sent the email, and we'll be doing sort of another follow-up in a few weeks. This event starts January 26th, so it's still a few weeks out.
Yeah, so I'm glad we're doing this because it's actually, I've spent a lot of time, kind of trying to counteract some of the stuff that's going on, and again, pull it back to what the actual issues are. And it seems like a lot of the discussion is avoiding what's really at stake here, what we're really talking about. And it seems like there's a lot of deflection going on. So I'm glad that we're doing this to help clarify what the actual concerns are, and hopefully the conversation can move away from whether or not you like this person or that person, but to actually talk about the issues. Because at the end of the day, you, I, or Derek, we're not, it's not about us. It doesn't matter. Literally, it doesn't matter. Like, what's going on is so huge that we really need to focus. And like you said, we need clarity on these issues. And there are some pretty serious fundamental differences of worldview and ideological worldviews where people are coming from. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the presentation you put together. So I'll just bring the slides up on the screen.
Yeah, and so I will just say, like, this isn't personal. I think there has been a lot of challenging things directed to me, but this is really about principle. And people have choices, and people can always make different choices, right? Like, you have your choice now, maybe people have made choices, and then you can reflect and make a different choice. If once we understand this giant machine, I think we realize that no one person is running it. I mean, once we actually peel back and look at some of the things around the Splinterlands game, do I think that these few people who are piloting this program in Morelia really have a bead on the whole thing? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so and maybe with more information, people will make different choices. I think some of the vitriol, it's interesting because I will say, this is maybe a difference of worldview, right? This is an event, they sent out a solicitation email yesterday soliciting sponsorships, right? And some of the sponsorships topped out at like $15,000 for the sponsorships for these events. And so, the question is, there's lots and lots of these events coming in the resistance movement. And maybe in some ways, I'm not really active in like these wellness spaces or, new agey spaces. And maybe these webinars have always been a thing, but there's a lot of money flowing through all of this, right? And there's going to be a lot of money flowing through these digital labor markets. So I get that there's a lot of pressure on individual people that might shape how they feel like that they can proceed. But I will just ask, think about the kids. So, and just so people don't think that what I'm doing is frivolous, like that I was just frivolously going about this. This is at the core of my being, really, is this idea of trying to keep children off of blockchain. And so, we're going to touch on these things later on, but just for sort of the overview of things that are in my mind around pay to earn blockchain crypto gaming, specifically talking about targeting youth in other countries by Silicon Valley and venture capitalists, and how that all works, right? So within the context, not just of the Splinterlands Morelia pilot, but even with the Rio favelas, should we be building a future where esports and online gaming is incentivized as a career? And again, maybe the people would say, well, it's a free market and everyone will just decide how that goes. But ultimately, that worldview is going to shape how we relate to the natural world as well. And we are stewards of the natural world. So as we have the next generation being groomed to live in the metaverse, and there are financial incentives for people, in the case of the program in Rio, this Afro Games program, there was a young man in his 20s who was a construction worker. He was an apprentice in masonry, not masonry, but just building things with blocks. And he left that job of building things to actually get a UBI, a universal basic income, and play video games. And so I'll talk about this a little bit later, but in the book, Werner Vinge's book, Rainbow's End, literally the physical world falls apart because everybody is wearing technology and they're just making shit up in their mind about what the world looks like. And so the world is reduced to just Quonset huts falling apart. And so we need to think about that because, Werner Vinge wrote that book because he was in circles of high-level military in San Diego and the Office of Naval Research. So he knew what was coming, and that's how he wrote that book. So we need to think about it. The gaming industries and a lot of these card trading industries, it's a bit of a hop, step, and a jump from online poker. And I know that one of the individuals behind the Rockfin platform, he's a professional online poker player. And so again, maybe that's good for some people, that might be good for some people. But is that a career that we should scale, that we should bring to scale, that children should aspire to be in large numbers? Because those industries are really connected to organized crime and money laundering and a lot of other things. So, there's questions about this as a career. I've talked a lot in the past about impact investing and how the world is being turned into a game. The world is being turned into a game by Niantic and In-Q-Tel and the CIA, and then they're going to bet on our behaviors in the game, our sustainable behaviors. So is that okay? For children to play these play to earn games, they're blockchain wallets, right? That gets them on blockchain. So yes, it's not the same as being put on blockchain for your birth certificate or getting your retinal scan because you're a refugee and you need groceries money, or being put on blockchain because of your education transcript. But in this, children are being given jobs, and a condition of getting that job is that you have a digital wallet on blockchain. There are huge issues around consent. Can children consent to be digital laborers? And I had someone early on when I expressed my frustration with this, and this is someone who spent his whole career in the computer industry. He said, well, I'd want to know more about this. Do they actually realize they're being harmed? Because maybe if they don't realize they're being harmed, it's not such a big deal. And so this is where the moral compass thing is are you in the camp that thinks that if something is potentially harming people, but they don't know that it's okay, right? So we have to get very clear on that. And there's lots of issues around consent and other elements that I'll go into. What are the safety elements around digital spaces in these online communities, especially in gaming communities where it's people of all ages, right? Especially as we look at the metaverse weaving into wearable technologies and biosensor technologies and very sophisticated levels of even up to programmable hallucinations, which is what's coming. Do we want to be commodities, right? Do we want to be self-owning commodities? Are those the only choices we have? And I wrote a blog post yesterday that was touching on like weaponized narrative. And I think sometimes they give you the choices that they want you to choose from among their palette of choices. But there are other choices out there. And so we can also not be ruled by central bankers, but we also don't necessarily have to be blockchain commodities. I believe that. Like that was something that existed pre-conquest, right? So that those are out there. We could reclaim those histories. It's really important that people understand that the video gaming industry is a militarized venture. It's built on militarization, and the metaverse is an inherently militarized world. Now, I will say somebody just had a comment on my blog post, and I would say that the negative energy is really profound, saying like, essentially, I'm not allowed to talk about any of these things if I use the internet because it's all the same. And what I would say is that I think people misunderstand the nature of blockchain in the broader technological system. Yes, it is all militarized. Would I wish that there were some other options to do this? Okay. The element of blockchain that is very central to this is that it creates the interoperable data system. And that is the relationality of that data that is of prime importance both to the finance markets, to the military signals intelligence markets, and ultimately to the AI machine learning in the hive mind consciousness, is the interoperability of the data. Now, sure, right now our data is spread all over the internet. It's messy, it's wild, it's probably compromised, it's a problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but the blockchain is a whole other beast. And if people are not willing to look at what the blockchain is meant to do, you're never going to understand the nature of my concerns. There's an element in here around schooling, children being sovereign beings and being unschooled. But this layers in with a future of gamified education. And my concern is that what I have seen in the past 5 years of research in the education space, it was all around gaming and gamification. And I didn't fully understand it really until the last few years, that it was really about this, the social modeling, the simulation modeling for the military and the finance. And then also the conditioning of your mind, the entrainment. And that's going to go even further once we get the augmented reality technologies down at a low price point and the virtual reality goggles. So if you understand colonization of bodies and minds as an imperial project, you know, it's like the guy said, if they don't know that they're being harmed, is it a problem, right? If you can get lots of people doing gaming and they're being harmed, but they don't know it, are they being harmed? I mean, I guess that's sort of a moral question. That's one of those philosophical questions. But the idea of empire building in the metaverse is happening. It's being run largely through the defense sector of the United States, along with other entities, China, Israel, Sweden, you know, other places, but Silicon Valley and the Cambridge, you know, Boston, Harvard, MIT are major players in that space too. So that's all signals intelligence. And then the last piece is that I really feel like there's a huge push lately around crypto and Latin America. And the idea that this particular dialogue is happening with the understanding of this cross-border exchange between Austin, Texas, which is a highly militarized city, as much as it puts on that it wants to be in liberal costume. It's a highly militarized city, and being connected to Mexico. So we need to really look at the history of the U.S. involvement in Latin America, in the social issues, in the economic issues, going way back, even to the early teens with Rockefeller and the oil industries, and really even way back to colonization, but definitely in the early 20th century. This has been a long time in coming, and what's going on in Mexico is it cannot be separated from the geopolitics of what's happening in the United States and in Silicon Valley. The other piece of this, so this is not my first wrangling with Derek Rose and John Bush on around blockchain. I guess maybe it's been a couple times over the past year. And again, it's a fundamental difference of opinion. There are people who have come in the blockchain space who imagine that it's about money. I understand blockchain to be more in the line of what Jason talks about, freedom tokens. It's tokenizing everything in the world, tokenizing natural resources, tokenizing people, tokenizing social relations, and tokenizing behavior. And that's the door that I came in. So it was really centered on children. It was connected to the IXO Foundation working in South Africa on this Amply pre-K attendance app that was on blockchain that would essentially, the framing was that that these, pre-K children would start to earn social credit by attending nursery school, essentially. But it was all built into the financial apparatus of the Heckman equation and human capital finance. And I found that really reprehensible. So that's the door I came in, and that's a fundamental difference that people who imagine blockchain as a tool of liberation have from me, because I came in understanding it as a tool of domination and coercion. The other piece of my story is it dates back to the DNC. The Democratic National Committee was in Philadelphia in 2016. And at that time, the Atlantic magazine rented out a sports bar near Reading Terminal, and they spent the whole week hosting various junkets and think tank people. And I had a woman that I knew who knew that I was tracking educational technology, and this person said, "Alison, you really should go to this event." And it was called Teaching for Tomorrow in the Creative Economy. Now, in the center there is, I think it's Paul Megan of Epic Games. Epic Games is with like Unreal Engine and building metahumans, synthetic humans. And it's, at the time in 2016, I didn't really understand the metaverse. I understood gaming. The woman on the left side is Suzanne Delbene. She's with the Internet of Things Caucus. She's former Microsoft. The moderator is on the far right. I'm trying to remember the woman in the green. She was a professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison who went later to UC Irvine, and her specialty was in game theory, gamification, educational gaming, and serious games. She and her husband. And then the woman with the red button or whatever, that is Helen Gim, who is our city council person. And throughout this event, which was maybe about an hour-long panel discussion, Paul Megan of Epic Games just kept saying, like, we need kids to code our video games. We need an education system that will get kids to code our video games. And as a parent, I thought, well, that's just odd. That like, why is that so important that the kids code the video games? But what he really meant was that the next generation was going to be responsible for making the metaverse, for coding it and really to build it and secure it. And that securing part, that cybersecurity part, is the new military zone, is to build this manifest destiny. And so the responsibility I feel of being someone who was sitting in the room that day and seeing this unfolding and then having a sense of what it actually means in terms of engineered human capital and feedback loops and digital nudging and brain entrainment and social control systems. This is why it is very important that I try to have this conversation with people, and that people should not think that I'm doing it lightly at all. This is not easy for me, but it's my job to do this. So the other thing that's important, Epic Games created Fortnite. And at the time in 2016, I had a friend who was a teacher in Maine, a second grade teacher. And what my friend was telling me is that these young elementary school age children were falling asleep in her class because they were up all night playing Fortnite. Okay, so Fortnite was actually scaled by Epic Games with capital from Tencent, which is the Chinese company. Now, I'm not particularly anti-China. We have to understand this as a fluid global capital. Now, Tencent owns 40% of Epic Games, and they created Fortnite with that capital. Tencent is connected to WeChat Pay, facial recognition pay. They have their own social credit scoring system. And my contention, because Fortnite is a multiplayer game that is global in nature, that has all sorts of data points that come along with that track behaviors, is that if you are going to, and these people have a very long lead time, right? The most powerful people in the world have more money. They have money they can sit on for decades. And if you wanted to plan a future global military engagement, say 20 years out, 25, 30 years out, you would create an incredibly popular multiplayer game and you would develop profiles of how the children would play it in all the different parts of the world. And then you would store those and you would run the AI and you would run the analytics on all of the behaviors, because it really is about counterinsurgent warfare. And that information does matter if you're planning military tactics against domestic populations. So I think that's really, really important to understand this military context in terms of what it would be for youth play to earn gaming.
Yeah, actually, I came across a video that I thought was that really added to this conversation from the World Economic Forum. It's about 3 minutes long. If you don't mind, I'd love to play that real quick, and then we can get your thoughts on it.
Right now, girls who play video games are 3 times as likely to get a college degree in a STEM field. That's science, technology, engineering, and math. Kids who play games love to learn about the science behind games, and that is the future of work. Games are being used in an educational context more and more. For example, the game Minecraft has an educational version that supports teachers in helping kids understand computational thinking. And there are other games that help understand historical facts. One of the unique things about video games is it meets students where they are. So when you're playing a game, you're playing at the level where you're ready to play, and you're advancing at the pace where you can advance. And that means that your education is being customized and your learning is really being maximized. A lot of people have this misconception that kids are wasting their time while playing video games. But what they're missing is that kids are actually building a variety of skills when they're playing. First of all, they're understanding the value of play and playing with others and building that sense of community. And second, and more importantly, you're building these soft skills like perseverance and empathy that you get in no other form of entertainment media. When people are playing games these days, they're actually part of a community. It's the digital playground of the day. It's helping kids understand what others are going through. Because you're playing in character with other people, you're building empathy in how other people are living, how they're creating, how they're playing together. More and more, games are looking at social good as an important outcome. Video games have the ability to reshape how we think about the future. First, in thinking about sustainability, more and more when we look at the environment, video games are being used as a way to teach people about climate change and sustainability. Video games are also being used in teaching people about conflict resolution all over the world. Video games are inspiring people to want to learn about the sciences and to be creators themselves. Video games are being used in healthcare, for example, to help kids understand what they're going through when they're going through cancer treatments. The game called I Hope lets them visualize how their bodies are fighting the bad cells. And that can actually bring about a lot of understanding in what they're going through.
So Alison, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know if you noticed who the gentleman was who was the narrator of the episode, but it was the Entertainment Software Association, which I actually have a slide of that later to talk about social impact. I will say my child spent a little bit of time doing Minecraft at the time, and they were in middle school, so I probably should have been paying closer attention. It's important to know that Microsoft owns Minecraft, and they also own LinkedIn. And so this idea that they're learning behaviors, learning skills in the future, all of those are going to be badges and micro credentials like on your blockchain dashboard, so that when you're a digital worker, the AI knows how to sort you based on your behavior tracking in game. And as I said before, it's also signals intelligence. That's a huge part of it. So the slide that we have up now is called, it's 3 books that I've read that I recommend to people. The first one is called For the Win by Cory Doctorow. And Cory Doctorow has ties, I think, to Institute for the Future. So I wouldn't say he's totally outside the system, but he has a very compelling storyline of this book. And I keep saying, if people who are very intent on promoting the play to earn gaming model read the book, I think they might have a different view of it. Because essentially what is happening in that story is that there are, multinational teams of young people who are playing quests in these games. But a lot of it is linked to abusive behaviors with children in China and in South Asia who are stuck in dingy internet cafes, spending hours of their day playing games to earn digital items that are then sold to wealthy people, like in Silicon Valley. And it's very abusive. And so in that game, the real world and the digital world sort of collide, and it's about sort of organizing against multinational global capital, both inside the game and outside the game. And so the idea of global crypto economics, it was really, really very helpful to read that book. It's a young adult book. It's aimed for like high school age kids, but I think it will give people, it will open their eyes to the harms that are baked into this economic system and the idea of forcing people to live in the metaverse. In that gamification, you see how young those children are, right? I think it's crazy to imagine that people, like, do we really want to teach children to only be able to interact with other children in a gaming environment? Because right now there's a lot of, children are getting socially crippled. Some of that is due to sort of the overreactions around people's, body and physical contact and like being friends and like slapping each other on the back and giving each other hugs and all of that stuff that has been stripped away over the past 18 months. And we have to understand that this is a global economic shift. It's an economic shift that's underway. It's not a public health event. It is an economic event. And it's not just about central bank digital currency. It's about the tokenization of everything in this digital world. And these young children are being pushed into that world. And it's up to adults, the adults in the room, to say, these children do not have informed consent about what that actually is. And it's very clear to me, the middle image there is Ready Player One. And, when we met up in Austin to do our field work there, Ernest Cline, who is the author of that book, and I would recommend the book over the movie, he's from Austin. He's writing that about Austin, this idea that we've killed the real world and that we've created these stacks of really depressing housing situations that no one can get out of. So they need to live in virtual reality and protect that virtual reality. I mean, I think in this case, it's supposed to be Cleveland, maybe Ohio, but it might as well be the favelas of Rio. I mean, that's the aesthetic that is being evoked there. So this is all unfolding in real time. And then I have Rainbow's End, which is what I talked about with the augmented reality world where the real world falls apart in favor of the fake world. And so within that space, that whole pitch of the World Economic Forum was to sell your soul into the video game, which makes sense because it's the guy who sells video games. Like, of course, he's going to want to sell you your soul into the video game. He doesn't want you to know how to interact with people offline because really the US military, the global, pulse network, the social physics, it doesn't count if it's not recorded as some data point. They can't capture it for their impact markets if it doesn't happen in a screen. They can't capture real behavior that is happening outside the reach of a camera. And so that's what we're dealing with right now, is deciding, again, the adults in the room, are you going to really throw these children into a world where you had the benefit of the real world, right? You had the benefit of going outside and playing in a creek and doing a pickup game of baseball or kickball or these things that were real. You didn't have to sit in a dark bedroom with a grilled cheese sandwich. I mean, that's every single bad thing of behavior that you're supposed to sit down if you can and have a family dinner together and talk about your day. No, you don't sit with the grilled cheese sandwich. No, you don't have 3 children with their backs to each other all on different devices. They want to normalize that, and it's not normal. It's not. And I mean, maybe there's already the world, like I think many of us realize there's been a split in the realities of around this global health thing, right? And maybe that's a split, but maybe this is another split. And maybe there are people who are fully willing to give up the real and just protect the oasis in the VR headset. And then if so, this presentation isn't for you because you've already made your choice. What I'm here for today is the people who don't understand the bigger picture, and there's still a chance to turn it back.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my kind of, even before all this COVID stuff, I've been thinking about the difference between the real world and these representations. So, before I was talking about money and law and these financial systems that are kind of like a grid that's laid on top of this organic world. And this is just the technology is an extension of it. I mean, I use, my camera and I use technology all the time and I really enjoy it, but I also recognize that these images that, it's not real and it can be manipulated to a great degree. So if your reality, I mean, we already have the media that's manipulating our reality and our understanding of the world, but the degree to which they can manipulate your perception, and they have a term called perception management, but that whole, construct can be, the ability for them to really shape your view of the world into something that's unnatural and artificial within these spaces, even if it's just like people talk about the metaverse and they think it's just Facebook and they think it's just VR headsets, but really it's all these different companies, and it's probably going to be more augmented reality than so much the VR headsets. But again, it's this fictional synthetic world, artificial worlds that we're, like you said, we're walking away from the real world into when we enter these spaces, and there's consequences for that. So
exactly. So this was one of the stories that I found when I was doing my work on the favelas. And again, this is why I reacted so strongly when I saw the clip about the play to earn stuff, because I knew what was coming. I think we need to understand, I mean, you can see in the top image, it's, early teens, preteens, they're in this sort of darkened space, playing games. The idea in Rio, because the communities are so poor, is that there are these subsidized spaces, like community spaces, where they go to have these high-end computers to play the games. And what's happened is that essentially the idea of identity politics has been brought in as representation, right? And so in the world of gaming, the idea is that you should have these favela teams, and that is how you articulate your culture, is through digital gaming and having teams that are identified as favela-based teams, right? And so it's fusing people's identity systems and their cultural practices into the gaming space. Now, these young people, like, they're, the program is backed by Fusion Energy Drink and the Secretary of Sports, Recreation, and Youth, okay, and telecommunications giants. And so these children, they're not doing this for these children because they think it's good for children. They're doing it because it's a market and it's something that they're using for their global capital. It's not that they think that this necessarily improves the lives of these young people, but they frame it as, and you can see where the arrow is, using art and culture as tools of social transformation. And so the identity element is very, very important. And, I know that in a lot of other areas in the ed tech education space, there's been, a major focus on indigeneity and decolonizing and decolonized tech. But ultimately, it's all still part of the military. Okay, so, I'm working on the favela stuff. I'm upset because not only is it working on, the UBI and the training for these kids and getting them psychologists and trainers and getting this data, and it's all feeding the telecommunications, but the World Bank is actually doing impact work, training youth to do blockchain coding and all that sort of thing. So that's being baked in as well. And so this is, within this context in December is when I see this interview. And this is just the short clip of Derek speaking to Katherine about blockchain.
The youth to understand and to build encryption. That is one other example I would give of, for one, I appreciate the nuance that we're having in this conversation here, because I think some folks who hear these conversations do tend to take a black or white approach, whether that's pro-crypto or anti-crypto or anti-blockchain, whatever. And I appreciate the nuance that you're outlining here. And for me, again, I know that the banksters and these folks, in their own word, they want to go and find the unbanked of the world. For example, a lot of the population here in Mexico where I live do not use, some people in cities, of course, they got credit cards and all those kinds of things, but there's a lot of people who are totally unconnected, disconnected from that system. And in their view, they want to come find these people, give them digital IDs, vaccine passports, et cetera, so that they can, bring them into the real world. That's their whole, spiel they try to pretend to be behind, right? And then at the same time, there are those who I think do have a freedom mindset and say, well, if I can go into a Mexican village or an Indian village or a Southeast Asian village where people are living on less than $1 a day, and I can teach them encryption, or if I can show them how, I've even seen some examples where people are playing games, but they're earning real world money through that, right? And all of a sudden this village has 10 kids who are now teaching each other how to play this game that they cash out real money to repair their home with, or to kind of empower their communities, right? You can see potential for positive use cases.
So essentially that's the context that I provided. I also provided the whole interview. And again, I think Katherine Austin Fitz's response was sort of like, that's probably not the best idea, like having these kids be on play these games. Like they should be, farming or doing things in nature. And to me, that feels more in line with the idea of what the people that I imagine like support the freedom cell concept are, like back to the land and that sort of thing. I think the first thing coming up is not like, oh, we should be doing crypto gaming, like that is liberation. There's a number of accusations that have been made against me about me being libelous or misrepresenting. But this is the words. The words are that it was good. It would be good for children or groups of children to teach each other and play these games, and that ultimately, the idea is that it is better than begging, and that is very much in line with Glenn Greenwald's sort of assertion that. Since we can't really fix the overall problem, we will just sort of make small measures in between and help some people out. And even though it's not perfect, it might be a good thing. And that's sort of, there's two schools of thought about that. And one was to hold the line and say, actually, this is not a good economic model for children. And another would be like, well, we'll just go along because it actually might help some kids. Now, I will say both, a friend of mine who is based in Mexico and then another friend of ours who is based in India says that actually a lot of children who beg on the streets are connected into larger networks that are working either for families or outside individuals. Like it's not necessarily their free choice to beg, that it is part of a larger structured economic system. And so in some ways, it's just this pivot away from begging also just feeds them into another alternate economic system construct. So that was the initial clip that triggered my response. And so after this, and there was some considerable back and forth, and I will be showing some of those screenshots. But so I decided to send out this email by either some were tweets, some were email forms on people's websites to give people a heads up that I was going to be talking about this issue because I thought it was really important. And I'll just read it out loud so people can have it out there. This message is to inform blank, so I put the person's name in, that Alison McDowell will be doing a write-up and a discussion about the Greater Reset 3 after that event concludes. Derek Brose, co-host of the event, has recently asserted his support for digital child labor and child self-ownership in global free market labor transactions. He and his colleague Kenny will be piloting a play-to-earn blockchain game, Splinterlands, in Morelia, Mexico. That game is backed by Singapore venture capitalists who are aligned with the United Nations poverty alleviation programs. Most decent people would find such a project targeting poor children, not just teens, but preteens, immoral. Our aim is to bring awareness to this situation and to let participants know that we will assume that all who decide to continue to participate in Brose's event with this knowledge are in fact aligned with his view affirming child labor and self-ownership. We plan to make it known to the public that all speakers were advised of this in advance and that their participation reflects at least tacit approval of this predatory venture tied to global capitalist interests. We have Brose's position as well as that of his colleagues documented at the beginning of this blog post, and then I link to the blog post, and I continue to collect documentation there. If you decide to withdraw from the event, please let us know at your earliest convenience. And so to me, that there's nothing incorrect or misrepresenting in that space. In many instances, I think people try to play both sides, but you'll see from the screenshot images that we have that this is very much the case. and maybe as a bit strong language to push people and to say that putting children on blockchain, poor children being targeted for blockchain crypto gaming linked to a World Economic Forum model is immoral. That is my position to hold. And so certainly people can make choices about their alliances and who they affiliate with, but there's a lot of looking the other way. There's a lot of looking the other way these days. And so I think for me, child safety and well-being is paramount. And for me, my goal, my grandest hope was that we would have a global peace movement of mothers against artificial intelligence. And because this is coming, this militarized predatory energy is coming at the cloud level that will affect every single person, every single child in the planet. We need to do it as one, not just for kids in one certain geography to be safe. All the kids need to be safe from this predator energy, and we need to understand it that way. And so that's my split with folks, is that if there may be people who feel like the most they can do is to take care of their immediate circle. I feel like that this is a spiritual engagement, and actually, you'll see in Derek Bro's the clip, I mean, it actually talked about spiritual warfare. If you see this as spiritual warfare, I think you have an obligation to protect all the children. And so after this back and forth, I was upset with Katherine Austin Fitz that she would be one of the speakers at Greater Reset 3, having engaged with Derek in this exchange, because she's on the side of saying, no, kids should just be self-sufficient and gaming isn't the best option. And so we actually had about 22 plus back and forth emails where I shared the screenshots I'm going to share today, plus others, and you can see it on my blog post and we can link to that. Just saying, hey, you can choose, you can make whatever choice you choose, but please know that we're going to talk about that this is the issue, and that how people proceed in terms of their engagement with this event and their engagement with Derek and his policies will reflect back on your position. And, and then for people who maybe just don't care about me at all, it won't affect them, right? But if they're people who value what I have to say, it will have some consequence. And that's all I can hope for, is that my small voice in my small corner of the world, trying to be someone who's sounding the alarm about the bigger picture and holding people accountable for their choices, will make a difference. And again, this is to say people could make different choices. This event isn't going to happen until January 26th. So there's always time to make different choices or to make public statements about one's position on this issue. But for now, after 22 emails and was continuing to be strung along, I just said, enough. If you're going to waffle on this issue, I understand your character. At this point in time, I feel I have a good understanding of your character, if that level of deflection, and I'm just going to proceed. So it appears that Katherine is going to continue with the event. Again, I will just say I'm not really sure what is at stake in attending a webinar that you would make such a choice, but I'm not going to second guess. She says that her focus really is vaccine ID passports, and that's all she's working on right now. She seemed very annoyed that she would have to think about these other issues, and that she's just all about the vaccine passports. Well, within the resistance community, and I have been saying it since the first week of April of 2020, this was going to be linked to the larger biometric identity program. And it was never going to be just about health. It was about geofencing, it was about social impact finance, and it was about creating digital twins for hive mind consciousness, ultimately with the goal of getting enough data harvested out of life on this planet to break the code of life. And that's something that Joseph Gonzalez had brought my attention to, was that code system of getting all of the data. And that's why I'm not in alignment with the overall genocide narrative, because I think we are valuable commodities to them, but we must be put on the supply chain, and that is about blockchain tracking. And it's not simply about a vaccine passport. It was never about a vaccine passport. It was about the biometric blockchain identity. And you can see that on the right in the COVID Credentials Initiative, which I added early on in this process, that Learning Economy Foundation, which is, before the pandemic, I felt that Learning Economy was going to be the entry point, was transcripts. Learning Economy is in there, as well as iRespond, which is retinal scans for humanitarian aid. And many of these blockchain systems were piloted through dispossessed people and refugee populations, because those are commodities, those are data commodities. That trauma and dispossession is central to the entire game of late stage capitalism. And, it could be because, Katherine Austin Fitz is an investment advisor. She has a whole issue devoted to environmental social governance investing. This is where global capital is going. And, I'm just saying it because that is the logic. And we can see the logic being built out by BlackRock, by the central banking systems, and it's all going to run through the biometric identity. But to limit the narrative to it being a vaccine pass, I think at this stage of the game is not helpful, because people need to understand that it's much bigger. And if we expanded it beyond vaccine language, we could actually bring in many more people who are in different silos right now over the health issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that one of the major differences is I have a problem with capitalism itself. And a lot of people, think that, oh, this isn't capitalism. But to me, it's that idea of investing. You're going to take your money and invest in somebody, but that investment means you're expecting a return. And I think that itself needs to be questioned. Like, I don't think Wall Street should even exist. I mean, it's all it is it's gambling. And I think that's a longer conversation. That's a much, much longer conversation. But I think that's one of the big differences is people still have a belief in some of these foundational understandings of how the world should work. And there's that idea of, this is the best system that's ever been created. And I think that needs to be challenged, not just a better version of it, so anyway.
And I agree with that, because I think what the logic that I have been continually presenting over the past, year and a half plus is that the imperative of capital is to create new forms of synthetic debt. In the 2008 crash, it was real estate and housing. And then in the meantime, after that, the wealth has continued to become more and more concentrated. So anyone who imagines the billionaire overlords have the interests of poor kids in Rio de Janeiro or poor kids in Morelia, Mexico at heart is fooling themselves, because this is a brutal machine. It is brutal. And once we tokenize everything, once we self-own as commodities on the blockchain, this machine is going to grind us up. Our bodies, our spirits, our communities, the nature around us, everything is going to be reduced to some sort of coded metric on a dashboard. So I agree wholeheartedly with you there. And that's just the logic of it, and I'm not saying that I'm, affirm some alternate existing political economic system, because I don't actually think that there is one right now that serves that function. I think we have to have a massive do-over. And it's one that has to take into account centuries of domination principles, centuries of Western scientism, and we really need to reevaluate how we are as humans in the world, and what kind of extractive exploitation that we take out of it. So I agree with you, Jason. So this slide is essentially like when I was exchanging with Katherine Austin Fitz, and I was trying to understand her position, and she was saying, well, I'm trying to figure out if I'm aligned with Derek Broze. And initially when he asked, I felt like I was in alignment because of being in alignment with Last American Vagabond people. And so I just want to sort of harken back, and again, not to make this about personalities, but just for point of clarity, throughout these skirmishes that we've had over the past year, it's been very much Derek Broze and Whitney Webb who have come after me about the blockchain situation and accused me of being libelous and lying, which is, no one's ever showed me anything that I've lied about. I've been lied about, but not on vice versa. So when we're trying to get clarity, I just want to document for people, not to say I don't use the word many people use, but I'm saying we need to actually have a solid foundation of what we believe in. So at this point, if the brand of the Greater Reset 3 and Derek Broze and the Freedom Cell movement and the conscious resistance is in alignment with Last American Vagabond, then maybe they too need to revisit where they stand on digital child labor in global free market economics. Because that is worth asking, just so we have clarity, not to shame people and not to, but we deserve to know at this point. Where are people in the gamification of life, especially as it in regards to it applies to the children of Latin America? Oh, and I will say too, this is a screenshot that I received from someone who did make an inquiry of Katherine Austin Fitz yesterday. Again, we exchanged 22 emails, she and I. I shared all of these same screenshots. I shared the link to my blog post. And her assertion is that she still doesn't believe that this is what Derek is advocating. And so for me, on principle, I'm fine if we have clear understandings of differences of opinion, right? If you want to align with the idea of human capital finance and children as digital global workers, and that is a social impact investment opportunity, people are certainly allowed to do that. It's useful to know so that we can make decisions about where we put our time and resources. I do not appreciate being lied to. So, I mean, as we walk through these screenshots, you can see, and I encourage you to look at my blog post, it's hard to say that she hasn't seen hard evidence because I've shared it with her very directly. So, and Jason can confirm this. So I have other ones that are specifically that have Derek's name on it. We are not in communication on social media. So most of this happens through folks that alert me when things are happening. But Jason, can you confirm that this is from an exchange you and Derek had on Telegram about this issue?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We had a little back and forth there.
Yeah, just for confirmation purposes, I didn't make this up or whatever. This is, primary source material through Jason. So within the exchange of the digital child gaming, Derek brings up Splinterlands. So up until that point, I don't really have any sense of any specific name. He's just talking generally about crypto gaming in the clip with Katherine. So now we have a name of a game, and he's asserting that about Splinterlands is one of the games that he's putting out. So within the Splinterlands game, there's a variety of ways of earning money. And I think what they would assert is that earning money in this online gaming space through NFTs and trading cards and tokens, and also through the attention token economy, which you can see that you can earn Hive, which is an interesting choice of currency, given what we know in terms of the loaded nature of languaging, that these Hive cryptocurrency tokens are given out just by participating in social media, even if you're not earning money with the cards. So it's several levels of participation that are netting this digital economic return. Okay, and it's around building a portfolio. So again, we're splitting hairs between people who think we got here because of global capital and how it's progressed as a machine, and people who may think like, no, actually that isn't the best way. So if you're training up children to build portfolios by participating in online social forums, that's sort of a difference of opinion there. So this is from the Splinterlands game. It's called specifically Play to Earn. So that's how the World Economic Forum describes these models of playing. You're going to be hearing a lot of it lately. People have been sharing a lot of different clips from various sources about in the future, all the gaming is going to be blockchain based. Okay. And so they talk about being a professional gamer. You can get, it makes it easy to earn on a daily basis. So they want to hold your attention, to hold your engagement. You can get rewards from tournament play. You can be ranked, go on quests. You can make money no matter what your skill level is. So that is their sell. And then it says among the many prizes you can get are collectible cards of varying rarities, card packs, magic potions, and dark energy crystals. Okay, so dark energy crystals, if we're engaged in spiritual warfare, okay, that's our engagement. That's what we're dealing in, dark energy, which is a tradable digital currency that you can buy items in the shop. Now, I will say this is certainly not just limited to Splinterlands. As I mentioned, the Cory Doctorow's For the Win goes a lot into detail about digital economic systems and alternative currency systems in the metaverse space. But there are many online platforms where you can either earn money to buy things in the game, or you can link it to your parents' credit card, and then your parents go into all sorts of debt with kids who are not really good at managing that. So in this thing, you have their digital currency is tradable as dark energy crystals. And again, they want you in community, right? So this idea is you are joining into this community, and they want you to participate daily. You can buy in-game credits with crypto, okay? So again, that's going back to you're not just earning money through participation, but you can actually use your crypto to buy assets in this online gaming space. And it says you can earn Hive cryptocurrency tokens by simply participating in the Splinter Talk social media community. Build your portfolio. So again, later on they say, oh, that this game is never intended for young people. Now, I'm not a gamer, and Jason, you know this better than myself, but I would say, I mean, it's conjuring up a certain aesthetic that is not unlike, at least in the upper section, like a Pixar Disney kind of castle-esque thing. It's not a particularly exclusive adult looking graphic imagery that we have here. Okay, so if you peel back, like, who's behind Splinterlands, right? And this is all fairly recent, within the past, I think, since 2018. You can see here on the one side, founded in 2018. Splinterlands is a blockchain-based card game where the trading cards are NFTs that allow players to own them. So I will say, from the standpoint of Derek and Kenny, as I understand their assertion, that in this way, the blockchain games are less predatory than the non-blockchain games because players get something for their time, right? That they earn value, and that in that way it is less predatory than people who would be gaming and not getting anything out of it. Okay, so that, I think that is how they would frame it, right? But then you're also being put on blockchain and managing a digital currency. So they were funded, the Blockchain Founders Fund. And that's the highlighted line up there, and Side Door Ventures. And even though it looks a bit hokey, no offense, but graphics are not super sophisticated. You might think like, oh, this is just like a rinky-dink game. What kind of game is this thing? The Blockchain Founders Fund is invested in a lot of major blockchain products right now. And the lead on the Blockchain Founders Fund, his name is Ali Madhavji, who is based out of Singapore. You can see on his Crunchbase profile, and that he is a senior blockchain fellow and involved in venture capital investments. Okay, and so his primary focus is the Blockchain Founders Fund, which is connected to the Splinterlands game, is an early investor in this game. So if you look for, I don't know how you pronounce that, INSEAD business school, like this is his background, and he is working on emerging technology. So it's the spatial web, it's blockchain, it's AI. And he is connected with, it says here, Ali consults organizations on emerging technologies such as INSEAD and the United Nations on solutions to help alleviate poverty. Okay, he's a senior blockchain fellow and recognized as a Blockchain 100 global leader. He also has ties to the University of Ontario, the China Accelerator. He's a Schwarzman Scholar, and that's also based in China. So he's quite a global guy, and he's advising on a lot of things. The operative word for me there is poverty alleviation. And so again, the framing of Derek's conversation with Katherine was not just that pay-to-earn crypto gaming was cool for grown-ups like in Cleveland, but that it was really a good option for poor children in places like Mexico and India, okay? And so when you see something like UN poverty alleviation, and we know that the UN, that's the engineering of life, right? Goal number 4 is education, goal number 3 is health, goal number 1 is poverty, and all of these opportunity gaps. That engineering can only happen if it's on blockchain and if it's tracked on a device. And just like the World Economic Forum video that we saw with the Entertainment Software Association, the children must live their lives on devices so that we can measure them, manage them in feedback loops, and get the quote unquote results, these key performance indicators that will enable global capital to run through their lives and behaviors. So I had a conversation yesterday with someone who said that he was a close friend of Derek's. He has a plan to be a speaker at the Greater Reset 3. Now, I will say of the 29 contacts that I made, only besides Katherine, he was the only one that got back in touch with me. Okay, so there's that. So I give him points for getting back in touch with me. And he said that his wife is from Mexico, actually, and that he is interested in decolonizing. And he essentially in the conversation understood everything I was saying about human capital finance, about channeling it through poor people, around predatory targeting of children in the metaverse, around the model of this being the decimation of attempted erasure of indigenous culture in the New World. All of that he got. But what I've found is that people who are connected into cryptocurrency and blockchain simply cannot let that go and understand that it is working as intended, which is to capture your consciousness and feed it into the Borg. So there's always, and this has happened with John, this has happened with Derek, they want to carve out tiny use case scenarios, like it's great for media, or it's great for this cryptocurrency, or what have you. But it's fundamentally missing the point of what the blockchain is. And so regarding decolonization, one of the points I brought up when I was looking up Ali Madhavji, in August of last year, they were doing the staking rewards begin this week. And again, it's all these crystals, and these were on top of one another. I had to break it to make it split. But, he essentially, because he's the investor, he puts up this Elmo little clip, and the Elmo is super excited about the staking rewards for Splinterlands coming online. Now, that might just seem sort of cute, right? But you wouldn't actually imagine a venture capitalist in Singapore using an Elmo GIF. It's kind of, it's a little juvenile, but my contention is I think actually that this is a larger signaling, because I've had my eyes on Sesame Workshop and Sesame Workshop's venture capital arm and their gamification arm through the Joan Gans Cooney Center for a very long time. Also, I told this individual that this type of work isn't actually decolonizing, because what Sesame Workshop frames itself as is the longest road in the world. And once you see who's actually behind Sesame Workshop, you'll understand that targeting refugee people through feel-good Muppets is not benevolent at all, as hard as that may be to stomach. And I was born the year Sesame Street came online, so it's hard to believe, but true. So Joan Gans Cooney is the creator of Sesame Street. She was working for the Carnegie Corporation at the time when they were developing the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which actually came out of MIT. So WGBH Boston, zoom, 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 which is what I grew up with, is really the war machine, normalizing for kids science and technology. And that sounds eerily like what we're navigating now, and just like the video that Jason, that you shared, right? Girls in STEM are great, and they all want to join the metaverse because they play games and they're learning about science and technology. And so that's like me as a kid coming home from school and sitting in front of the Zoom TV show and being programmed by that, when probably I should have been outside digging in the dirt or something. So Joan Gans Cooney is the foundational presence of Sesame Children's Television Workshop and Sesame Workshop. They have a whole gaming program called the Joan Gans Cooney Center. Her husband was Peter Peterson, all right? So Peter Peterson was the chair of Lehman Brothers. And then Peter Peterson with Steven Schwartzman founded Blackstone. Both of them are part of the Council on Foreign Relations, right? And so once you start to follow the money, this isn't really even that hard to find out. But you have to be willing to look. And when I started talking about Sesame Workshop, it was because I was following the MacArthur Foundation that was doing this 100 and change competition when I was doing my education research work. And Angela Duckworth was in Philadelphia, and she was one of the contestants. And she didn't win, but the project that won was a project from the International Rescue Commission in conjunction with IBM and Sesame Workshop. And so they're really mining the trauma of refugee populations for social impact profit. So this is a post I wrote in January of 2018 called "Who is Pulling the Muppet Strings?" And this is linked to the Nudge Unit, JP Morgan Chase, Rockefeller, Goldman Sachs, Intel, Cisco, Microsoft, and Reach Capital. These were all people who were putting tablets in the hands of Syrian refugee children as a social impact project. And it was being sold through Sesame Workshop. Now, Sesame Workshop also, through the Joan Gans Cooney Center, is pushing digital media unlearning and video gaming. And you can see this is just one random screenshot from their website on video gaming, but they talk about mood management, young people talking to each other about gaming. And, I don't think any of us who imagined what we thought Sesame Street was is what it actually really was. And I got a lot of hate for sharing that post about the Syrian refugees 3 or 4 years ago. But somebody needs to say it, just like somebody needs to say the stuff I'm saying now, because it matters. And if we're going to protect life on this planet, we need to protect it for all the children, and particularly the ones that are in the most dire circumstances. So this is one of the images from Derek. This is on Twitter, and someone was engaging with him around this issue, and I will just read it. He says, "Sorry, I don't think parents own their kids or the state. Kids do have agency. I guess obviously it differs from kid to kid, but perhaps get out of your bubbles and come see kids begging for money and then see them making money with crypto or games, not by being on the blockchain, and complain." Okay, so this is somewhat deceptive because the parenthetical not being on the blockchain is not congruent with the Splinterlands gaming model that is being brought to Morelia, and I will show that later. But he's definitely bringing with his friend Kenny, they're piloting Splinterlands there, and in order to play that game, you need a digital wallet, and that digital wallet is on blockchain. They specifically say that it runs on blockchain. And I've already mentioned before the idea of the begging, that it's part of organized systems, and that we really should be fighting, I think, for a future where kids neither have to beg nor sit in an internet cafe plugged in to play crypto games so that their families can eat, or that they can repair their homes. That's not, like, fundamentally, we shouldn't just sit back and think that that's the best we can do, especially given the fact that a lot of what the economic system, the problems of that in Mexico and Central America and South America have everything to do with the US government and the US financial system and the US military. Now, I will say, I think the narrative shaping on this that I have seen coming out is very much about the state not owning children, but it is blended with parents not owning children either. The two things, so the state owning children is the higher level profile, but then at the lower level, there is this idea of children as self-owning commodities.
Yeah. Well, and also too, like, you know, he was like, even that, bringing that up about people owning children, nobody's even making that argument that parents own their children or that the state should own their children. That's not even what this discussion is about.
I just want to make clear that, like, it's part of a global geopolitical system, and that I think a lot of how people proceed is that they look at a very narrow slice of the situation and they justify by saying, I'm not really causing harm here. I'm not causing harm yet. Or I'm not looking at this in context. So I'm not going to really think about how it could go wrong in the future and the groundwork that is being laid. I'm not going to think about the fact that the people like Peter Peterson, who's no longer living, has been laying out the rails for human capital investment and technocratic management of humanity, since, the late 40s, right? That's been happening through the creation of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, sad as it sounds, that, we have to sort of grapple with these myths.
Well, also too, I think it seems like maybe he doesn't understand that this is connected to these larger things. Like, he thinks this is somehow independent and disconnected from, like, the UN or the World Economic Forum's plans, but it is in fact bringing you into these blockchain, and blockchain will be interoperable. That is what they're working towards, where you can jump from this platform to that platform, but it's all still on the same network.
Right. And I will say this, so this slide, this is for Splinterlands. It says clearly it's powered by blockchain technology. This is capitalism. This is digital capitalism. And digital capitalism goes faster and harder and cross borders in an instant, right? And the brutality of it is going to come right along with it. So you can see the interoperability. They're talking about the cards that you get, which are these NFTs, which are essentially sort of like art. And I know that increasingly there's a lot of people interrogating the idea of digital art and NFTs and what the heck it really is, because Jason, I know you talk about in these digital spaces, what value is being created actually? Like, where does the value come from? And a lot of it is purely fictional, building on a long history of fictional elements that the central banks are using. But it's a new version of fiction. And I have to say, like, it really troubles me the degree to which art is being baked into this. But these cards are being framed as art, as NFTs, as tradable commodities that you win and use, not just in this particular game, but across other games. They talk about OpenSea, Peak Monsters, Monster Market, and other places. So, and you can rent cards, right? So, like, part of this whole thing is, like, we're talking about, like, the rentier economy, right? You own nothing. Like, you'll even rent your crypto gaming cards, right? It's like the whole renter's economy, and that's what this is based on. So, okay. So this shows the wallet of Splinterlands. In order to play the game, you need the wallet. In order to get paid for your attention in the tokens, you need to have your wallet set up. So this is what the page for linking the wallet to your accounts. Again, you can use your Bitcoin or other things to buy things in the game, and ultimately that in gaming environment, which they say isn't augmented reality, but once you understand the metaverse as series of rooms and experiences, some of which are augmented in physical world, some of which are totally gaming. It's all augmented reality when you are working with assets that have embedded data in them and embedded value in them. That's all part of the mixed reality spatial web. So their understanding of the metaverse isn't fully developed as to what it is. I think they think it's only the metaverse if you're like in a game, in Mark Zuckerberg's game maybe, or in some other game maybe. But no, it is linking digital information, digital value to real world assets that are used either in the real world or in gaming spaces. So the wallets are what link you, the digital version of you, your avatar, your digital twin, to the real world version of you, and that you carry value back and forth through the portal of your wallet. And we know these are hackable. These are problems. Like I have friends who have been harmed by these hacked wallets, and now we're putting them in the hands potentially of children who don't even understand the technologies. Like that's what we're talking about. Yeah. This is an image from Derek that's talking about, he says, well, what she's concerned about is something I share concerns that the idea that children will be placed on the blockchain and tokenized as part of the Internet of Body, things and body. But what I was talking about was making money outside of the banks and the governments. Okay, so he's not understanding that these children in this game that he's piloting in Morelia as part of the Freedom Cell movement and the Greater Reset 3, because Kenny is one of the speakers in Greater Reset 3, is a blockchain game. And by having this digital wallet, you are foundationally already part of the Internet of Bodies, and your relationship to items and relationships in the space and relationship to what you own is all part of your social capital scoring system.
Yeah, it seems like there's like it's like talking out of two sides of his mouth here. He's like, I oppose this, but then kids can make money doing this. I mean, it's clearly that's what this is. It is on the blockchain. It is tokenized. Just because it's not government, like.
I mean, I know. I mean, the challenge is that I think there are people we have to understand that the spatial web is built on public-private partnerships, right? It's fascist. It's corporate government. Like it's the worst thing possible. And then soon to be automated and maybe even put on blockchain as its own self-running automated computer system. And that's something that I talked about in my recent post about Bettina Warburg and vending machine government, right? So the government enables access to a point for private capital, but eventually the government will be consumed by the machine. And then essentially that just leaves, there is no even government recourse. You are just at the will of global investors. And, and that's something I really wish that someone like Katherine Austin Fitz or someone who is understanding of the central banking system, understanding of global currency systems, understanding of the digital identity, not just as a health passport, but as your digital twin as a social impact commodity, we can go there because global capital doesn't care about children either, right? Global capital, Peter Thiel, Piero Media, they are fine to run children around like they're digital puppets. Tim Draper, who's connected with the guy who's funding the Blockchain Founders Fund, Tim Draper, he wants you to live as an avatar. He's fine with that because guess what? They've already scored their own spaces where they don't have to do that shit. They don't have to do it where they're at, okay? It's a system of domination that currently involves both the government and global impact investors through the Impact Management Project. But one day the government's going to be gone, and one day it's all going to start to be run. Imagine like Mark Gates Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg, as a automated monstrous system investing in human capital tied to smart environments and brain entrainment, MK Ultra, Metaverse, Tavistock, Metaverse, mind manipulation. I mean, it's almost beside myself how bad it is, and the fact that people, if people just said, you know what, I'm sorry, I didn't know that, but in looking at it a second time, I can see your point. But the challenge is that none of these people, this entire premise that is built on blockchain existence, on tokenized existence, it all falls apart if you let go of the blockchain. None of it happens. Like you would think a government would happen independent of that. But when you start to dig into who the speakers are at this Greater Reset 3, there's a high proportion of people that are connected to the blockchain. And so no one, it is highly problematic for them to let go of that, to understand what it really is. That has to be done. Yeah. And if people are truly about living off of the land, living in communities, living in local associations, caring for one another, you can do all of that thing without a digital ledger. It's possible.
Well, and I don't know if you had a slide about it, but one of the things he said is like, I didn't mention anything about the metaverse, as if this is independent. I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what the metaverse is. They think, oh, that's Facebook's thing, or oh, that's the VR headsets. And you said it before, like it's not that. It's so much more encompassing. It's all of these companies. There's going to be different spaces in the metaverse, and then NVIDIA has a thing they call the Omniverse, which they basically say it's basically like HTML for the metaverse. So it's all about interoperability, where you have an identity and you can jump from space to space, and that's what we're moving toward. And these things are not independent of that. They're not separate from that. And again, you can look at the funding and look at where some of the people that are behind it, that have these connections to the UN and have connections to other things. So I think that that's a problem, that people don't quite understand what the metaverse is. I mean, I think it's going to be more augmented reality rather than just virtual reality. But it's about digital twinning, and it's about there's a geospatial world on a digital space. So
yeah, the wallet is the portal that links the two and creates the data interoperability. So all the people who are like, Alison, you're not allowed to say anything because you use the internet. It's different, folks. I'm not saying the internet is great. It has its huge problems, right? But it's the interoperability that is the metaverse portal that is central to the blockchain. So the key word in this is sovereign and consensual, right? So this is Derek again replying, lashing out. I am defending myself to people who insist on twisting my words. I don't see you defending your positions. I know where I stand. Children are sovereign, and they want to make a living. If they want to make a living, they should, by whatever means they choose, so long as consensual. Is that radical? Okay, so I would say clipping somebody's language and then sharing it in conjunction with a link to the whole video isn't twisting words. Like we're sharing his direct statements, which are the key elements here is that children are sovereign, which in itself is sort of a loaded word, and that they can work. They can make a living as long as it's consensual. So I would say my statement about Derek Bros supporting digital child labor, right to digital child labor and self-ownership is supported by the screenshots that I'm sharing. He can't really have it both ways. He's clearly said in these two screenshots, as well as the mention of Splinterlands, and then there's some additional documentation by his colleague Kenny about the Splinterlands project, that is the core of his argument, that children are sovereign, they should be able to make a living however they want if it's consensual. Now, I would insist, because my frame is very much about looking at systems of domination that go back 400 years to the doctrine of domination, to the colonization, which now we are all facing colonization by debt, by biosensors, by nanoparticles, by brainwaves, manipulated brainwaves. All of that is bodily colonization, but this is an extension. And so if you talk about consent outside of understanding a power dynamic, right? A power dynamic of age, a power dynamic of financial access, the power dynamic around stability, a power dynamic around trauma, that is a very disingenuous language to use to talk about that children can give consent. Because one, they're not going to have informed consent about what it means to sign up for that digital wallet long term. And two, they're children. We should be making sure they're okay. We should be building community in the real world to make sure that our children are our precious resources that are not offered up to global platform labor. For quite a bit of the past year and a half, there's been a huge push around sovereignty, right? We've seen that in the resistance movement. There's sort of different categories. There are people who are very much about maritime law and strawmen and asserting your sovereignty, and you have courses and different things. My understanding of sovereignty since the beginning of this, based on my understanding of blockchain identity, was that they were always calling it self-sovereign identity, okay? This is what was being set up for the spatial web. Self-sovereign identity is that you have an identifier that links you to the internet, that links you to your wearable technology, so that you can be tracked through the metaverse. whether that's mixed reality in your physical body, in a material world, or that is your avatar, where your assets, your behaviors, your data points are carried over into a virtual world that is being built in the metaverse, in a virtual world building. So the self-sovereign digital identity is a construct for the spatial web. Okay, so Sovereign Foundation is one among many. This is connected through the World Wide Web Association, and Sandy Pentland out of MIT has been central on this. And Sovereign, this is from Hyperledger. This was the March 2019 that they were given an award for the greatest social impact. Okay, and it's social impact because global capital is going to manage you, attempt to manage you as their digital puppet in the metaverse and track your behaviors aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, that's the game, guys. And Jason, that we went to Tucson and I presented on the gamification of smart worlds and smart cities there. That's the game. And the game is being run through augmented reality. And the pilot of that was Pokemon Go, and that is Niantic. And Niantic seed funding is from the CIA. It's through In-Q-Tel. Okay, so they're going to put you in the CIA's game, and then they're going to track their impact. And once they securitize that debt around whatever services that they're providing you, like I said, in that Afro Games in Rio, they were providing the kids a psychologist and a trainer. Maybe they provide them a UBI. All of that is tracked against their behavioral compliance. So I think Derek's choice of the word sovereign is important here, because sovereign is a very loaded term.
I just watched an older talk of Stephen Newcomb's, and he brought up the word sovereign, and I can't remember what I'm trying to remember what it was. First part sov, I was meant something, I can't remember, but reign was like to reign, like domination. You reign over something. Maybe I'll find that clip and include it. But it kind of turns it like, you have a reign, like the king reigns over things. So I don't know. It was just kind of interesting.
Well, a horse has reins, right? You steer with the reins, right?
The idea of sovereignty is actually something coined by Jean Baudin in 1577, and the official definition of that goes with it, going back to French absolutism, is supreme power over citizens and subjects unrestrained by the law, meaning that the claim of supreme power is not restrained by any law, but all of the citizens and subjects are supposedly under the domination or the dominion of that sovereign supreme authority. When you break the word sovereign apart, it's S-O-V-E-R, which is sover, which means super or above, and reign, which means to rule. So it's to rule from above, which is the theme of domination.
And Stephen's work is so very important, because even he deconstructs the idea of freedom, that it's under the dome, that you have certain rights, but you only have the rights that are granted to you under the dominion of others. And that if you seek to exert your own rights outside of the dominion of others, outside of the crown, outside of the central bankers, then
outside of the blockchain,
they will attempt to off the blockchain. If you assert your right to live outside of the metaverse, at that point you become a threat to the system, and they will deal with you as they would deal with other threats, in whatever capacity they can.
And even within these spaces, it's like there is a set, you enter into, a blockchain game or whatever, and you get tokens based on this, or you're getting tokens on coding or doing cryptography or whatever. It's still not you that's actually determining what the goals of the outcome is. It's this, there's rules that were set up, and then you enter into this thing, you're submitting yourself to this thing, and then that's fine, you get tokens, and maybe you can convert those tokens to something that actually will help you, but you're still trapped under this this dominion. Anyway, which is opposite of what they're marketing it as. They're talking about it's going to liberate you, and you're not. You're just entering into a new system. You're entering into a different system that you don't actually have control over. And actually, contract. I found an interesting video from World Economic Forum talking about contract and the nature of contracts. But I've even thought about that, like contracts. Like should someone, like even an adult, like a consensual adult, should a consensual adult, let's say they're desperate and need money. Should they be able to enter into a contract that enslaves them, essentially.
Right.
You know, and you think about debt bondage, and I think that we think contract is this holy thing. Oh, well, you agreed to it. Well, people will agree to a lot of stuff when they're desperate. You know, I have a book back here about modern slavery, and a lot of that is like human trafficking, where they go into these poor communities and they'll basically convince a woman to work or whatever, and sometimes knowingly in the sex trade. Because they're desperate and they need money for their family. So it's not like it's not like, oh, well, you have a choice and you choose to enter in this contract. When you have people that are desperate and poor, they're gonna agree to stuff. And even now, like, there's a great documentary called Terms and Conditions. Think about what, even just, using Facebook or using Google or whatever, you're agreeing to a lot of stuff that you don't even realize you're agreeing to, or you probably don't agree to, but you want to use the service, and you figure, well, they're probably not going to act on it. Well, with smart contracts, it will be an automatic thing. Like, you're going to be trapped into these things. Where, like right now, a lot of people can do things to kind of work around it or whatever, try to hide their. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, I would just say, even in that regard, yeah, you're right. So, we would never allow a child to enter into a contract, right? But the metaverse is run on smart contracts. Millions of them, right? And one of the last blog posts I wrote was about Stanford Medical School developing smart toilets, right? You have a metaverse relationship with your smart toilet. Your freedom token of what you can do on the day depends on the biometrics of what happens when you provide a fecal deposit, in the morning, what the AI says you're allowed to do based on whatever its metrics are. And that's the new smart contract world that we're about to enter into on blockchain. And that's what it's ultimately about. And I will just say, like, we need to do another program on this, but a lot of the early treatment, many of the folks ramping up the early treatment dialogue, is going to be linked to ongoing biometric surveillance through, smart devices. And so, yeah, you can imagine yourself to be a sovereign commodity, but then the question is, that's language they're giving you. They're giving you language and trying to sell it to you as liberation. I've shared some clips from John Trudell, and he's like, we are forgetting we're human beings. We're forgetting the power. It's not out there. It's not in domination. It's not in money. It's inside. And once we actually get clear and we realize the power is in us, and we teach our children that the power is in us, that cannot be controlled. That will never be controlled. So that's the stuff that we need to be talking about.
Yeah, and also,
so why don't we go ahead and move on? I know it's getting late.
Oh yeah, real one quick. I did want to just throw this thing in real quick. One of the things they say is, like, you're going to own your own data. You get to own your own data, and I've thought a lot about that. And one thing about owning your own data is it precludes not having your data collected. Like, that's pretty much an automatic.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to collect data on you, but you get to own it. Which I don't trust that I don't trust that your data can ever be private. I mean, I think that that's a total myth, that you can have secure, encrypted, protected data. But, like, I don't want data collected on me, period. Like, where do I fit in this whole situation? You don't.
But then you can't be in the metaverse.
Right.
If the data isn't collected on you, how can you exist in the metaverse? You can't, because they won't know what you look like. They won't know what's in your wallet. They won't know anything about you.
Right.
So you can't actually be in the metaverse unless they can track your data. That's the point.
Right. So the very nature of it.
Like, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
The metaverse can't exist without the blockchain. Can't. So our question is, do we sacrifice the real and the natural for this thing? Like, I know there are a lot of people who are in these sort of voluntarist communities who have a sense of, like, coming at things from a religious perspective. This is a white paper from the Idaho Freedom Foundation from several years back. This is a libertarian group in Idaho talking about, like, get the government out of your business, get everybody on blockchain. So you can get the government out of your business, but then you can build up a community care system where your churches can invest in you, right? And so, like, picture this future where, like, you're a member of a congregation of a mega church that has facial recognition and knows, like, how much tithing you do and how much input and output, right? Like, there are things we should not be doing. We shouldn't be in the game that they're presenting us. But this is how things are proceeding. And so people are like, well, I'm religious and I like blockchain, right? But they're not taking it to the next step, saying, I don't think Jesus would put people on blockchain, right? Like, that's not actually charity. That's not caring for your neighbor, is expecting some sort of economic output based on meeting somebody's basic needs. And that is what is coming. When the government goes away, which is something I think a lot of the anarcho-capitalists imagine, like, we can't wait till the government goes away. Well, then great, then we get to be run by the faith communities, right? I don't know that those are going to necessarily be that much more accountable as institutions, or the nonprofits, or individual fancy donors like Peter Thiel and Pierre Omidyar. We need a better system. This isn't the right system, in my opinion. So again, this is just what happens when the government is gone, right? They've already got this. This is the NPX Impact Security. This woman, Katherine Schwab, I'm not sure if it's her or her colleague. One of them is out of Wharton. So again, coming back into Philadelphia, they're developing survival of the fittest investments in nonprofits, right? And that's all based on economic returns tied to the Internet of Bodies data surveillance, okay? So your human capital will be invested in based on global financial investors, and the nonprofits that don't play the game, they don't play it to the way that the investors want it played, that they will be shut down. And it's the ultimate in free markets. And we have to understand that the gamification is baked into all of this. We're about free market economics. And this is why I keep running around to all the libertarians and like the agorists to say, like, hey, this is what's coming. Your free markets really mean that Peter Thiel is going to own shares in a bunch of people. The Vatican is going to own shares in a bunch of people. The Alibaba is going to own shares, SoftBank. It's not your nice little neighborhood community that you're imagining here with your nice little Main Street and your locally managed schools and this stuff. The blockchain metaverse world with free market platform labor is going to be really cutthroat. And as Richard Baldwin talks about, the speed and the physics of the digital world are beyond what we can even imagine our process at this point. So I'm not going to hit on all the speakers, but I just want to touch on a couple that speak to this point. So Mike Swatek is one of them. The arrow is there. He's on the top row. So Mike is someone who's providing technical support for a project, I believe in Arkansas, called Valiant, although they are working with other sort of agorist, voluntarist communities, this idea of sort of community building, which again, I'm not against legit community building, but they are working internationally. They talk about having connections with groups in Mexico, Eastern Europe, and Chile, importantly, all right? And so they're saying that their idea of an intentional community tied to land is meant to be, in their liberty vision, profitable. Like that their goal of, they have freedom and free association, but at the end of the day, you can see it says, on the matter of is Valiant for profit? Yes, it is, and it is meant to be that way, okay? Moreover, the lot users are participants in those profits, so everyone in the community is interested in the success of the community. So this is an intentional community that is built around, in some ways, communal ownership of land, but it's a for-profit structure. Now, Jim Davidson is his collaborator on this. This is Jim Davidson's blog post. This is the front end of this article about Valiant for profit. In it, literally, he opens with a quote from Milton Friedman, which is its own very specific idea of free market neoliberal ideology around economics. The quote here is, there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits as long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say engages in open and free competition without deception and fraud. So I would say, like, there's lots of libertarians who like frame all of this as crony capitalism or something like that. But like, I would say it's just how the machine works, right? And so if what you're saying is that what Friedman's is saying here in 1970, the rules of the game, that is a game, and that there's a social responsibility to maximize profit as much as you can do without fraud. So then the question is, what can you normalize in society in terms of treating social problems as investment opportunities, which is what we know is exactly the plan. You know, in 1970s, just a couple years, like right on the advent of the rollout of the Trilateral Commission and the technocracy that is coming online. So these people have, you know, this is 50 plus years out, that they've known that this is coming, but they were waiting on blockchain coming to scale. And that is what the public health biosurveillance state is about, is to get everybody in the supply chain queue for the global financial markets. So, I think this is really important context to understand what is my difference of opinion on the way that we should be in the world, because then my question is, would the people in this intentional community imagine that they might be investing their money in the kids in Morelia playing video games? Or, and do they find that is socially responsible? And then what obligations do we have to one another outside of the confines of our intentional communities? And then what does it mean for people who can't get into an intentional community, right? Because that comes with its own buy-in, because that's a for-profit venture. What happens to the disposable people of the world? And that's where my positionality is in Philadelphia, and which is very frustrating in the resistance space, because very few people are framing this within the context of poverty and trauma, which is central to social impact finance.
And I also think the idea itself that you can create some independent, intentional community outside of this larger system on the internet, which of course the internet itself, the physical wires, the thing that connects this is all controlled. It's all, I don't know if it's controlled, but it's part of the larger system. So just the idea that you're going to create some space outside of this, or even just a physical space, I think is kind of delusional.
I mean, I would say if you follow Alana Freeland's work around the weaponization of the atmosphere, and if you understand directed energy weapons, the idea that unless you have some super deep bunker somewhere and you have a whole system and you're willing to live underground, literally, the idea that you're going to set aside something separate and it's going to be attractive enough to attract other people, and that it's not going to become a target of the system of power that we built up, is a little naive. And that's sort of where I'm at on this.
And again, there's still,
I wish it were different.
But even these systems,
so that's why I feel like we all have to find it.
But even these systems they're promoting are still using the system. They're still underneath the dome. I mean, you're not independent from the dome. You're still underneath it. So again, and this was just interesting to me. So, Jim Davidson, who's the collaborator on this project with Mike, and you can see the little thing. So he's connected with this Houston Space Society, and clearly it only has 8 members, so it's hard to say how meaningful that is. But this idea of space colonization, I think that there's this ultimate idea of the total free market separatist community, right? We're so separatist, we're going to outer space, and that is in alignment with this total separation from the world as a whole. And for me, my position is I think we should try to make this world better rather than to necessarily separate from it. The next thing about being separate, so John Bush, I've had, I've been at odds with John for a long time about blockchain, and his frame is that, here's a few use cases that are good, and I will shame you about these use cases about online media content or these other things. But John is based in Austin, right? And Jason and I went down to Austin. We did a lot of field work in Austin around video game design, around defense contracting, around ID 2020, around the Texas digital passporting systems that are coming with the driver's licenses. So John is very deeply in the mix in Austin. He has his own podcast. And at one point he invited me to be on his podcast, and sort of, I try to do my due diligence, because my contention is that who you associate with reflects back on you. And I'm not saying John is a bad guy, but I was just looking into who else is he talking to? And one of the first things I came across was that he had done an episode on his podcast with Patri Friedman. And Patri Friedman is Milton Friedman's grandson. And he had been advancing this idea of seasteading. So going out and having sort of these libertarian, utopian things out in the middle of the ocean. And this Seasteading Institute was backed by Peter Thiel, which is, kind of interesting to imagine what it would be like to be trapped out in the open ocean, run by, the guy who funded Palantir and the guy who set up global neoliberalism. So this is him. So Patri Friedman, he went to work for Google. He's getting money from Peter Thiel. He's definitely this is the techno utopia, right? And John is here. He's hosting an event, a podcast. This isn't from March of 2021, so recently, about governance. It says that John is a radical activist, entrepreneur, and father. So John is sort of embedded in, this idea of the great escape, I guess. So the seasteading with Milton Friedman, right? So we're imagining we've got a couple speakers here are aligned with this school, the Chicago School of Economics. And,
the work that I had been doing for like 3 or 4 years before the global lockdowns had everything to do with James Heckman setting up equations for human capital finance and equations for gamified behavior management for children in schools, but also for home visits and targeting the kids who are going to be tasked to build the metaverse and live there. And so he is a Nobel Prize winning economist at the University of Chicago, the Chicago School of Economics. And so especially if we're looking at Latin America, given the framing of what happened in Chile, right, with the Chicago boys and neoliberalism, is that if what we're talking about is splinterlands and blockchain and a free market capital version, we can't, it's not responsible to look at all of that being set up in Mexico without looking back at the history, right? Like things are ruined, is my contention, because not because it got broken by crony capitalists, is that it is the nature of the machine to break things, to cause harm, and then to find new ways of breaking things and causing harm until everything gets pulverized. And so my frame is very much, I don't think that the idea of free markets, when we're talking about a metaverse reality managed by sociopathic billionaires in potential and in AI high frequency trading, is going to get the result that we imagine, and certainly not for the children. So the last thing is that for people who aren't familiar, so we're also entering into the moment where we're talking about universal basic income. So that was part of one of the gaming programs in Rio, was that, people got a guaranteed income. That is straight out of Milton Friedman. Like that is not, many people on the left imagine UBI as some sort of socialist enterprise. It's absolutely not a social, its origins are with Milton Friedman.
You mentioned sociopathic billionaires, but even if well-intentioned, even if someone is coming at this like really wanting to help, there's something problematic about the system itself where you have a billionaire, it's the hand that feeds is always above. So even if they have good intentions, there are still systemic problems with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, and to me, so what I'm trying to get clear on is to say, like, we are all interdependent on one another. And the cloud-based techno, internet, nano things, techno tyranny that is happening at a global scale. And it is happening because of concentrated global capital across nations. I mean, there's concentrated capital in China. There's concentrated capital in Rome. There's concentrated global capital in Toronto, in New York. I mean, in Sweden. Like it is wherever there are the billionaire class, it has to flow through life. And in flowing through life, it's going to turn life into a machine, or try to turn life into a machine. And it's going to be brutal. And I just feel like we have to find a different way through. But we can't unless we actually take a look at the past and understand the history and how we got here. So, okay, so this is one of the other speakers. So this is Kenny Polorentano, who's on the bottom row there. So Kenny, after I wrote my first blog post, and Kenny wrote his response, and I think it was on the Splinterlands social media page. So I don't know, maybe people got paid in some Hive tokens to engage with the content. I don't know. I don't have a digital wallet, so I didn't get any Hive tokens on this. But, and it's fair. I'm fine if people want to sort of look at my information and have a different point of view. Like, I'm not blaming Kenny for having a different point of view. I would say his documentation of the larger picture, in addition to what Derek shared in terms of his tweets and his exchanges on Telegram, it fills out the picture and it makes it harder to deny that he doesn't know what's going on, right? And so in this first, it's about 5 different screenshots. I have 3 of them here, but it opens with Kenny saying, yesterday a good friend sent me this link to an article by Wrench in the Gears that is basically a hit piece on my friend at dbros, which is Derek, for promoting at Splinterlands, which is the game. The article is rather full of unrelated points because she admits she's working on an article about a different topic, as well as a lack of understanding of blockchain or the difference between play-to-earn gaming and other styles of gaming. Okay, so this goes back to what I said before. I would say from Kenny and Derek's standpoint, play-to-earn is better for poor people because there's some sort of value that you're getting from the time that you spend in the game. Okay, that I think that is fair. But this point does show that that Derek is connected to Splinterlands, is connected to Kenny, and that this model is a play-to-earn gaming model, and that this idea is, I think what Kenny is asserting is that the play-to-earn blockchain model is better in terms of income opportunities for people than other gaming opportunities. So this is another screenshot, and I have it underlined in red. It says, part of my upcoming trip to Morelia, Mexico is going to be helping locals who are interested get set up on Splinterlands and delegating them enough power and non-starter cards to be able to get up to real earnings. Because in a place where full-time corporate jobs are about $6 US per day, Splinterlands is a viable replacement. Okay, so he's acknowledging that you have to have some money to get into this game, but he's saying that he's going down to Morelia and he's going to be up, they're going to subsidize to get some people started in the program because they feel that it's a good income earning opportunity. So then he says, to her first question, he pulled out, regarding consent, can children give consent in online spaces for transactions? Now, those are my words from my blog. Can children give consent in online spaces to transactions? Kenny's reply is, to her first question, obviously it depends on the child because this is a really broad term being applied. Are we talking about a 15 to 17-year-old computer genius or a 6-year-old? Okay, so the response isn't, of course we would never do gaming with minors. Like, that wasn't what was said. The response wasn't, this is not a game for children. This is a game you should really be 18 or older to play. It is debating what, it's loosey-goosey, which is how a lot of this stuff is. It's very loosey-goosey. And so then where the other arrow is, he says, again, we've moved to discussing the opposition, the market that NFT and play-to-earn gaming is attempted to replace with actual ownership of products and the ability to earn. She's literally making the argument for blockchain gaming. So Kenny is already in the world that the children, like living in the metaverse and doing this for a job is not a bad plan, right? And my position is that I don't think children can give consent to do that. Now, I'm not saying that other gaming models with UBI or whatever the thing that's happening in Rio is good, right? It's bad. It's probably bad in another way. Maybe that, I don't know if those people are put on blockchain to get their UBI. It's possible, but it's different. But if Derek is saying that I'm misrepresenting his position about that there is a Splinterlands game coming to Morelia that is being underwritten and that there's a contention of using that as an income replacement, potentially with children, none of that is false. Like, none of that is false because Kenny has it all in his blog post here. So again, we already saw some of this earlier, but it's a World Economic Forum. What play-to-earn gaming can tell us about the future of the digital economy and the metaverse, and they're in favor, right? And so this play-to-earn gaming is in alignment with ostensibly the agenda that most people, I would imagine, who align with a freedom cell mindset would not be embracing something that is a World Economic Forum promoted project. And so this is a comment that Kenny was trying to leave on my blog post, and his comment, and I will read it here so everyone can see. There is no metaverse, AR, or VR involved in Splinterlands. It is a digital card game that is definitely not played by kids anywhere, both because it is far too complicated and because it requires investment to play. This woman is simply pushing libel in an attempt to character assassinate Derek Bros. She's either a Fed or simply a dishonest hater trying to get more attention. Okay, so I guess clearly Kenny doesn't know a whole lot about my work against blockchaining children that goes back 5 years. I would say when he's saying that there's no augmented reality, I would say as soon as you have a digital wallet, you're dealing in augmented reality because that is, you're issuing tokens with metadata attached to value and attached to someone's digital identity. So that is augmentation already, all right? So it may not be virtual at this point, but it's definitely augmented. And he's saying here that it's not played by kids and it's because it requires an investment. But that actually goes counter to his blog post, which is still up, where he says, we're kind of, he doesn't say that it's not for kids there. He's like debating about a 15 to 17-year-old versus a 6-year-old. And he's not acknowledging that they're coming down with subsidies to get this game started. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so this is the final point. He says, however, are these children or anyone else potentially in amazing positions to help support their families and communities by playing games? Quite possibly. Okay, so that sounds pretty clear to me that he's like imagining there's really good possibilities for children or anyone to earn money for their families. And then again, he says, this is just going back. Part of his trip to Morelia is getting locals who are interested getting set up, okay, because it's a viable job replacement. So, my email to everyone was very clear. Bros is supporting global free market digital child labor, child self-ownership. They're going to Morelia with Splinterlands, which is backed by the Singapore VC firm and the United Nations Poverty Alleviation. So those are all factual things. And then people can just figure out how they feel about it. Because I think it's one of those things that I'm worth drawing the line and saying, if you're someone who will look the other way when we're talking about free market labor for vulnerable communities without informed consent on the blockchain, if that's where you're at, then that's a break. If you want to call me divisive about that, I think that is a division well worth clarifying. So the interesting thing about this is that he's saying that children definitely don't play these games. Splinterlands was founded 2 years ago. And again, this is part of my obligation because as Jason pointed out, the holding company called, I think it's Steam Monster, is in Greater Philadelphia. Of course, it's always in Greater Philadelphia. So as a Philadelphian, as someone who is grappling with the mythology of freedom under the dome and all of these things, I need to tell you this isn't okay. The stuff coming out of Philadelphia is not okay. So one of the co-founders is, I don't know if it's a gentleman. It says Jesse Reich. I'm thinking a male, Jesse. He's the CEO of Splinterlands, okay? And it's in his LinkedIn, it says it is the single most played blockchain game in the world. Now, I don't know how you tell that, but 5,000 daily active players, cards worth millions and tens of millions of games. It's the market leading game. Okay, so I guess now we know, even though it might look a little shocky, like within its category, it's significant and I guess worthy of, the Singapore guys investing in it. So where exactly is it? This is the trademark for Steam Monsters. Steam Monsters is the holding company for this. And the corporation was at 24 Veterans Square, Media, Pennsylvania. So this is a suburb of Philly. It's not too far, maybe half an hour, 20 minutes outside the city. And when I see Media, I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, well, Vantage, Vanguard. Vanguard's campus is actually out near Media, and I was curious if it was anywhere near Vanguard. Well, it turns out it actually isn't because Vanguard is in the suburbs closer to King of Prussia. 24 Veterans Square, Media, Pennsylvania, is actually downtown Media. So Media is the Delaware County courthouse area. It's the county seat of Delaware County, which also includes some of the main line, which is some of the richest real estate, most wealthy venture capitalists in the world, or in the country, at least in Pennsylvania, live in the main line in Delaware County. So that's where Steam Monsters has its mailing address, because I'm a history person and I just can't help myself. This past, I think last year actually, was an anniversary of the break-in of the FBI building in Media that exposed COINTELPRO, the FBI tracking of dissidents in the United States. And it turns out that building, now it's not the same building, that would have been rich if it was in the same exact building. That building where the break-in happened is one Veterans Square. So literally one building down in the next half block down is where Splinterlands and Steam Monster is based. So it's somewhat of an aside, but I think energetically it feels like these stories loop through history, and that part of what I do is read the landscape and like, where is this stuff, right? Where does it live? Well, it lives in downtown Media, and it lives not far from the COINTELPRO break-in, FBI break-in for COINTELPRO. So this is, this is the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI. So that was the building that was, again, a building and a half down from the Splinterlands Steam Monster office building. So this is Mr. Reich. This is from his LinkedIn. So I think it's very interesting because my contention on Twitter earlier was that I really feel that the gamification of education, online education, digital education, is going to start to merge with online digital work. and online social impact markets in human capital management. And that all of those things are going to start to converge through the blockchain identity and the digital wallets, which will be digital vouchers. And so I find it very interesting. So this is actually Mr. Reich is based in Mount Joy, Pennsylvania, which is Lancaster County. So he has a colleague that is in media, and then he's out in Mount Joy in Lancaster. But his whole background before starting the most played blockchain game in the world was selling publishing, was selling learning systems, was selling curriculum for Macmillan Learning, and then prior to that point, his background was in chemistry, and he was a professor of chemistry in Massachusetts for a while at the Massachusetts Maritime Academy. He was working on STEM curriculum specifically, and I think, Jason, we can hark back to that World Economic Forum clip where it's like, girls who play games are really good at STEM. And isn't that great? Because we need them to build the metaverse and secure it for, as our digital army. That is what his background is. And so this idea that somehow this isn't all about children, I think is disingenuous. I will say his first couple of years of work after he got his PhD was in biofuels. Now, I'm just going to put that out there, but I've increasingly found that I'm getting very disturbed at the intersection of alternative energy and smart materials and nanomaterials and gamified behavior. So I think his trajectory from biofuels to professor of chemistry to STEM curriculum publication sales to the blockchain game is compelling and is related to the target market for youth in Mexico for this program. Bless Derek, he just keeps digging in. I guess we're both obstinate that way, right? And so he's doing he's doing a poll, and his poll says, "Do you think you own your children? What about the state? Are children simply property or sovereign beings with their own agency?" And then he's having people rate these. Like nobody's going around saying parents own children. That is a straw argument. No parent. We cherish children. That's what we do. Now, Derek doesn't, I understand, have children of his own. So maybe he's not there yet. But no parents go around saying that they own their children. They're there to protect their children. So the majority say that they're a guardian, not an owner. 27% say they are my property. 4% say they do what they like. And 5.9% say digital child labor ! And I'm not really sure what he means by that. Maybe people support digital child labor. I don't know. Maybe those are the hardcore gamers. But then underneath he says, I really love this response. I don't have children, but I think of everyone as sovereign beings, and sending kids to public schools is child abuse. Most people send their kids to public schools, which is, in my view, the main purpose of it is to get children to believe they are property, and then they can grow up being a slave in the system and then send their kids on that same path. I believe children should be considered individuals and shouldn't be considered property by the government or even their parents, especially not the government. If I ever have children, again, this is someone who's not yet a parent, if I ever have children, they will be unschooled. I think parents need to find the balance of protecting their kids from harm and giving them freedom, but they should always lean in the direction of more freedom so the kids can grow up to be free individuals who make the world a better, freer place. Okay, so there's lots of freedom there. But I would say, in response, again, people are not understanding that the blockchain identity system is meant to go to your education vouchers. So all of the people who are unschooled and homeschooled, all of those community-based programs are going to be locked in on blockchain. So essentially, once we tie this into human capital finance markets, your library, your climbing gym, the makerspace, the theater, the Little League, all of those things, they actually want to know what your social behaviors are. And so you're going to get a blockchain digital voucher to use in your community so that they can measure your human capital and then they can bring everything online into one standardized format. Do you think we've seen it in Philadelphia. Our libraries are a central part of the learning ecosystem model. So this person, again, most people don't know. I would say most people don't know. And these digital voucher systems are even being advanced by conservatives and libertarians, but they call them banking products. So I think even having this conversation around education loops back into the gamified labor.
What's weird about this poll is he asks three different questions, and it's really convoluted. And then the answers, what are these answers? what question are these answers to? It's kind of a convoluted thing, and I've noticed he's done that several times where he kind of misdirects people, like, I didn't say this particular word, and it's like avoiding the actual argument. And so I don't even understand what this poll is. I mean, you have 3 different questions. It seems really convoluted in and of itself. It doesn't even create a clear, cohesive understanding of what people.
Well, even when, on his Facebook post where he said that I lied about him, at the end, he just said, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, good. So to me, like, that actually doesn't show a sense of like fair engagement with like the material that you're trying to be confusing to people. And then, I feel like that we need to be clear. My goal here is to be very clear. Just own your position. If your position is that children should be viewed as human capital products and digital laborers in free market global economics based in Milton Friedman and building on the legacy of what he has done to Latin America, just own that. I think you're going to be hard pressed to frame that as liberation to people who actually know the history, but you're entitled to that opinion. Just own it. And that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm saying, is that the people who are participating in the Greater Reset with this knowledge will end up, they need to be very clear with themselves too. It's not a half measure. You can't just kind of support this. So this is Michael Crow. It's important to know he's the president of Arizona State University. He came out of Columbia University, which is the home of technocracy and industrial engineering back to the 40s or 30s. Under his leadership, Arizona State University became highly, highly militarized and pushed a lot of online learning, gamified learning, a lot of programs around sustainability and wargaming simulations, channels a lot of Koch brothers money through there. And this is a short clip where he talks about imagining a future educational model where instead of going to class, children would simply play games. And then eventually when they got to the end of the games, they would have met all of the competencies. And that this is a program that was being advanced with Bill Gates.
We have 150 partnerships. We've built a learning platform that's unparalleled. We launched a program in August just to offer a few courses to some folks. On a global basis, we had 192 countries respond. Over 120,000 learners for the first couple courses that we put out. We had 12-year-olds in Peru complete college astronomy courses for credit. I don't know what that means. It means something. I had a meeting yesterday with Bill Gates in San Diego as a part of the ASU GSV Innovation Conference on Educational Technology that we had 3,600 people attend yesterday. And I was walking through with Mr. Gates the fourth realm that we're presently operating in, which is education through exploration, through game-based learning. Or just imagine this at the end of the game, and we're building this game. At the end of the game, you don't take a single test. You don't take a single course. You don't have a single lecturer. And at the end of the game that you play, you'll be able to pass any college entrance exam, or what we call Cambridge A-level exams. Anyone that completes the game, boy, girl, doesn't make any difference. Any A-level exam in math, chemistry, physics, or biology. Period. What does that mean for learning?
So essentially what he's saying, and there are some other clips from that talk, and we can share the link to the larger talk, but this is a presentation made to U.S. defense interests and I think the TRADOC, Training Army Doctrine Command Center. And like he starts out his talk saying that essentially today's college students are cyborgs. They're Homo sapiens, sapiens.net, and that they should be treated as such. And so this is the new educational model. And Michael Crow his vision is that there will be a 1 billion-person university and that it will all be online, and that people, like you saw the World Economic Forum narrative, right? That they'll meet you where you are. They'll guide you with the nudges. They'll, and again, you have to ask, if the game is concentrating power and wealth, how are you to imagine the person giving you the nudges is actually interested in empowering you in a way that might overthrow the system? It's not reasonable, right? The system is not going to empower you to overthrow it. That's just the logic of that, right? And so as you're being engineered and children are being engineered, and this is my frame within hybrid learning and online learning and the push for AI, artificial intelligence education back in 2015 when I first came, like, they're going to totally brainwash kids and put them on different paths, which is in alignment with what the comment on Derek's post is. Yes, they are going to program you. They are going to engineer you, but being in a crypto blockchain game is not the better option. The better option is getting out of the game altogether. And so once you understand the billion person digital university for the Homo sapiens sapiens.net, and you understand that the goal is to get real-time data analytics through screens and phones and devices and VR headsets, feeding it all into the sentient world simulation, is that it's a vast network of both feeding the financial hedge fund bets on the human capital and the military, right? And so this builds off of a concept that dates back to at least the early 90s called One Laptop, One Child, that was advanced by Nicholas Negroponte out of the MIT Media Lab. And so he wanted to get a laptop in the hands, a cheap, crappy laptop in the hands of every kid in Africa, framed as liberation, so they could go spy on them. I mean, it's just like parents who can't understand, who are so fearful about in-person education, they don't realize that like their Hewlett-Packard Chromebook is collecting so much data on their family, they can't even imagine how that data is going to be used, not just now, but it's going to go into Bluffdale and they're going to store it for 100 years, right? That's the program. And so Nicholas Negroponte's brother, John, was involved in all sorts of regime change in Latin America. And so you've got these two brothers who are involved in like military signals intelligence, regime change, digital economics, managed behaviors, running laptop programs. And it's coming back and it's running through UNICEF, the UNICEF Innovation Fund, which is connected to AI and blockchain and digital identity and drones. And it's like we are literally waging war on the world through Silicon Valley and the Manhattan and Connecticut and Northern New Jersey hedge funds. Like not exclusively, sure there's others, like sure SoftBank is in it and sure UBS Bank is in it, but we are responsible for a lot of this. We're responsible for it going back a long ways. And so like, that's the thing that makes me so angry, particularly about their targeting of Mexico, is that it's not right. It's just, and at some point we have to draw the damn line. And that people with high degrees and high levels of resource access that can't see this or refuse to see it or look the other way, what kind of resistance is this anyway? And maybe it's not most people. Maybe there's just a sliver of people who actually are willing to look at the whole thing. But we're not, some of us have to. Some of us have to do it. And I would just say on those maps, like there's danger in those maps because they got deleted off of Little Sis. I made like 350 maps over 4 years. And they weren't because I had a scoop or something special that somebody gave me insider information. It was just being willing to look and follow the money and see the system. And so what we're living in right now in the resistance is the inability and unwillingness of people to look and think systematically. Because maybe they're scared, because maybe they're following certain personalities that keep them in a silo. They're being led by the nose because they're not empowered to do their own work and their own research. And what I'm saying is, I'm not here to be your celebrity. I'm not here to hold your hand. Like, I'm not here to likes or be part of your attention token economy. I am on my own journey. And I will share what I have freely with everybody because I can. And I'm happy to do that for the collective, and just don't use it to hurt people, but I'm fine to share that. You know, and I ask if people can to support you, Jason and Raul, because you guys are doing this hard work. You know, along with my friend Steffers and my friend Lynn, there are a handful of us that are interrogating the whole machine. But this is where we have to get to. Can't look the other way anymore. Because if so, it's a sham. It's a sham. So context matters. This is all programs that I entered into Little Sis that were part of Arizona State University, where Michael Crow is. You know, you've got the Arizona State University and Global Silicon Valley Summit, which is pushing all of the ed tech, the human capital finance, the income sharing agreements. You've got the Trusted Learner Network, which is building the blockchain identity, the learning economy. All of that feeds into things like the Decision Center for Educational Excellence. It's data analytics. The Centers for the Future of War, again, war gaming. The School of Sustainability. They don't give a crap about the real world. It's about the data analytics and the barcode of life. ADL partnership. We can track it. We can use our XAPI technology to track every interaction and make it a token and put it in your blockchain locker. Youth justice, we're going to frame all of this as we care about disenfranchised youth. Denny Stanford School of Social Policy and Family Dynamics, we're going to pretend that we care about your families and your social emotional learning. Weaponized narrative, we're all navigating that. And then within that, you have the Center for Games and Impact. So all of the gaming is central. The idea of the game and the militarization is central. So that's what's the barcode there. So this is this Thrivecast is part of the Center for Games and Impact at Arizona State University. Again, Arizona State University is connected into the XAPI tracking of skills and micro-credentials, the things that the AI will use to sort you as global piecework labor, whether that's in a game or out of a game. They've framed this lifelong learning on a phone. And this is augmented reality. Like, I know that like maybe Kenny and Derek want to imagine augmented reality looks something different than a phone. It's not really different, right? It's about a digital identity system that is being tracked against behavioral and assets in a digital locker. That's all you need for augmented reality. Augmented reality is a QR code. Augmented reality are these badges or these things, these tokens that you have in your wallet. That is what augmented reality is. It doesn't look like a game necessarily, because the game is going to be over the entire land. And the game is going to be run by the CIA. And a lot of it is going to focus on quote unquote sustainability, which is fake sustainability, which is a militarized, turning the world into a parody, a replica, a counterfeit of itself. And it's going to be framed as we care about your mental health, like this glue software for self-improvement in relationships. They're pitching it through targeting formerly incarcerated youth as this lifelong learning platform. So when we talk about living in the CIA's video game, it's nudges in the world through your freaking phone and your blockchain identity. And to me, if Splinterlands is truly the biggest blockchain gaming platform there, and it has the backing of the Blockchain Founders Fund and behind that, Tim Draper, it's there because they're looking to pivot that into something bigger. That is going to meld a gaming platform and an online learning platform. So again, this is just touching on, I have to tell you this because this is my city. We're part of the Niantic pilot. We're a part of the Knight Foundation. We're part of augmented reality, where under lockdown, they would go around and put codes and geofencing down to say, oh, look, while you're alone in social distancing, you can walk in the park and listen to a special poem tied to a place. That's the augmentation. A playful path to community, only it's the CIA. In In-Q-Tel, Michael Crow, it's the military. And so that's what we're talking about that is coming. And it's coming, I can see it because I've been put here to see it. And that's why I have to tell people, I have to tell the people of Morelia what's coming. Okay, so then we have Brandon Wallace. Brandon is one of the speakers at the event. He's based in Texas, all right, Austin. So I'm not sure why within the Freedom Cell community, like this wouldn't be a bit of a red flag, but this is like from the Conscious Resistance Facebook page that like he's talking about the Greater Reset 3. So it's this event. And he's talking about Brandon's background with planned systems, that he is a U.S. Air Force intelligence operation veteran, okay? And that he runs this planned systems, which is building the metaverse. And so when Derek wants to try to say that he's not really talking about the metaverse, if you were against the metaverse, you would not be inviting a former high-level like Air Force intelligence operations veteran who's building the metaverse to come to your event. It's just inconsistent. And so like in his Crunchbase profile, it says, as a USAF veteran and a senior analyst entrusted with a TS-SCI clearance, Brandon has lived and worked around the world conducting all source analysis and decision support, including deployments to OEF and OIF, okay? So TS-SCI is top secret clearance, okay? Now, I don't know how many people, maybe it's not that hard to get top secret clearance, but like for me, this would be like, I would be like, what if what we're doing is back to the land, what is it? Why do we need the metaverse, right? Like we should just be living in community, in our communities. So Austin, Jason and I did quite a few field visits there. The rise of Austin in the 50s was built around defense tech. The University of Austin is central in that, is central in high tech, in AI, in nanoelectronics. There was just a bill advanced forward for several tens of millions to go into the J.J. Pickle Research Center, which is in North Austin, which is working on nanotechnology space. Booz Allen Hamilton has just cut the ribbon on a co-working space in downtown Austin that we visited that is essentially meant to match smallish businesses in the Austin area to U.S. military contracting. Okay, so that's the environment of Austin. Context matters. That's where John Bush is based. That's the Texas half of this equation. We also went to EA. It's one of the video gaming companies. While we were in Austin, there's many video game design companies there. So we have to understand that the video game design system is integrated into overall simulation systems, into the geofencing systems, into Keyhole, into Google, into the metaverse, the layers of reality on top of the real world. And there's a lot of video game design in Austin. This is just the homepage of Plan Systems. If you look at it on a laptop, this is what comes up. And, it took me a minute to look at the dome and I'm like, is that DC? And no, it actually is Austin. So that's the Texas state capitol. We know that they are planning to be one of the leaders in blockchain development and rolling out digital driver's licenses. That was part of our visit. But it's kind of an unusual corporate presence there. I would say there are people who know far more about design strategies than I do, but you've got Saturn, you've got these large looming dark objects, you've got chess pieces, there's some purple digital, diamond dots there. And it's kind of I guess a virtual replica of downtown Austin and the state capitol area. That is their homepage. And then at the top, we've got the hexagon, which we know, of course, is also the cube, and the cube being blockchain. So that if you draw the line through the middle and you've got the cube for the blockchain. And so this is just a video. I'm not playing it for this, but you can see, so the description of their video from 5 months ago is a platform for building the open metaverse. Okay. Yeah. A platform for building the open metaverse. So it's a thing. These people, that's what they're building. I'm sure that they'll say because it's an open plan metaverse, it's better than some closed plan metaverse. I mean, that's how it goes. But they're building the metaverse. Their opening credits have the hexagons, which are very similar in terms of the structure for graphene and these sort of plane, two-dimensional plane systems.
Well, yeah, and also too, the metaverse itself, again, is not just Facebook. It's Facebook. I mean, that you can build your own little platform. I mean, nobody will probably be on it, but like I said, if you look at NVIDIA's, what they call the Omniverse, the idea is that there'd be more than one metaverses that are connected, where you can jump in and out of different ones. So the idea that it's open, open source or whatever is not that meaningful, because there's still these, I'm trying to think how to word it. Anyways, it's not just like one company or whatever, but it'll all be.
They're all going to be interoperable. They're going to interface. They're designed to interface with one another. So you can carry your assets. I mean, we saw that in Splinterlands, right? They're like the cards you earn in our game, you can take with you to other games. And that's how the metaverse works. I mean, I've described it like a year ago. I said, imagine, because this is related to file compression software, and this is something that University of Utah is very central in digital objects, that you've got a file cabinet full of an infinite number of file folders, each of which are some sort of scenario or gaming space. And that depending on if you have the right token or the right level of access, you can open the drawer and pull it out. And so you look at it, you spend some time in that file in that gaming space, and then you close it up and you port to another one. And that's how it's going to work, is that you're going to port through your digital identity, and then supposedly things that you earn or your scoring that you develop in one file folder will be sent to the other file folder when you go to the other space. But it's also the metaverse is like infinite numbers of secured, controlled access file folders, a lot of which you're not going to have access to because you're just like a dumb person in their puppet game that they're playing. This is the next image. Again, he's U.S. Air Force, intelligence analyst. He's talking about mission critical applications and interactive environments where you add labels and links to any location. So I can't even imagine what an intelligence analyst would do with such information, right? What are people thinking in these freedom cells? And this is nothing against Brendan the person, but Brendan, the idea of inviting people into your freedom cell who are intelligence analysts who are building the metaverse, it doesn't make any sense. And it is relevant to the context of this conversation about Splinterlands and gaming. Okay. So this is the consent part of the conversation. Jason, can you just confirm that these are from the Telegram channel?
I am the bro in this situation.
Jason,
I'm sorry. I'm the boring bro. I've also been called a lapdog, and irrelevant, and what else? A moron. I mean, yeah, he's called me quite a few.
Yeah,
names.
we don't have to. We'll just keep it. But anyway, I just want to make sure, because I don't have Derek's name on this, that since you were the participant in this conversation, that it is what it is. So he says, I'll just read it. Jesus, bro, you are boring. I explained myself already. I never mentioned the metaverse or the type of scheme she is worried about. I am simply talking about mutual exchange, voluntary and consensual exchange between two parties, whether kids, teenagers, or adults. To anyone reading this, this is the kind of shit I am talking about. I'm sorry she has an issue with people making money, whether it's with video games or labor. That's how an exchange works. And in some cases, it is already empowering people. So, I think it's pretty clear, right? Like, even if he wants to say in that particular moment he didn't say metaverse, he's clearly involved in folks that are working in the metaverse space. There's actually someone I didn't put in this, and we'll follow up with some more folks, but there's someone else who is building a sustainability related, like Civic X video game that seems very aligned, like it has the rainbow circle and stuff aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it's not like he's not in the sort of gamification metaverse space already. But the thing that I do want to point out is in this one line, he says kids, teenagers, or adults. And so I think there's some question, and this is where the nuance would come in, right? Like if you didn't say kids there, you might just presume teenagers meant like young adults, right? 18 or up. But the fact that he broke kids out implies that all of this free game stuff around consent and exchange actually applies to children who are 12 and under, right? Because a teenager is 13. And so when you're adding kids to the teenagers or adults, that means it's free game on everybody, right? And to me, I find that the idea that a 12-year-old could participate in a consensual exchange, an economic exchange, or any exchange, a smart contract exchange in the metaverse is problematic. And maybe he, on reflection would agree with me on that. But I think we need to be very clear that this is what we're talking about in terms of trying to make this acceptable. And for me, that this is not acceptable. So, we've seen erosion of parental rights and the lifting up of children as entities with agency, younger than 18, right? And so we've already seen this around the public health stuff, right? And that is very integral in terms of school-based health systems. Okay, so that's what this slide shows.
Also, I was trying to find the video, but there's a World Economic Forum video that I got a couple of years ago. It's on one of my hard drives, where it was kind of like in envisioning what's the world going to look like. I think it was in like 2050. But they were talking about children actually having the right to vote. And that's again, like,
I've got that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you found it. Oh, great. Perfect.
I've got a screenshot of that. So.
Oh, perfect.
So yeah, so this is the voting, vote 16 USA. So things are getting, and like we've seen, and again, we should value children's input totally. Like we should cherish children. We should value their input. Children don't have a lot of life experience, right? So there's things that youth brings to the conversation. There's things they can't bring to the conversation because they haven't been around long enough to actually have experienced some hard knocks, been betrayed, have bad things, know the ropes. That's just how it goes, right? And so you need a collaboration between youth and elders. And we've seen, I think, within the Greta phenomenon, the focus of lifting up youth exclusive of community and saying that youth voice matters more than anybody else's voice, which I think is very dangerous because the youth need guidance. We need each other, and to have it separate and to be framing it separate is a problem. But this is also part of the consent. And so, there's some stuff in there that sounds problematic. There are things that happen in virtual spaces that are inappropriate. And as we know that people have been stalked online and then found in the real world, including children. And then we have seen increasingly now we have haptics with this, and we have you can be psychologically damaged with assaults, verbal assaults and visual assaults in digital spaces. And I don't think as a culture we have come to terms with what that means before we start throwing the door open to children being in these spaces no matter what, right? So this is age of consent for sexual relations. And France, they're talking about setting 15. But then in the legislation at the time, and this is, I think, a couple years ago, they were saying, well, originally they had put it at 13, right? And so I know, like, my primary focus area isn't the pedophilia, but it's a huge issue, especially in terms of recent events, the idea of trafficking and trauma of children in this way. So this is another huge problem around the consent. All right, so we've talked about consent. We've talked about issues of assault, really, in digital spaces, both grooming children in virtual spaces and potentially harming them in the physical world, or potentially even just assault in the virtual world that happens through emotional harm, haptic harm. And this is not like cancel culture stuff. This is real. Like, I mean, when I first saw the first virtual reality headset demonstration in 2016, the guy had put it on his sister-in-law and she was on a roller coaster, and she was kind of squealing being on this roller coaster. Now, I hate roller coasters. It's not anything I like. And so when I saw that, I said, this thing is a torture device. Like, this thing can totally be used as a torture device. And I don't think in this idea of like enlightenment, progress, disruption, people are willing to look at these technologies in the dual use nature of it, right? So if you can be sexually assaulted in the metaverse, that's the MIT Media Review. And then the FBI is talking about targeting children in video games more broadly. That was, this summer in Cleveland. So the consent, if we're talking about literally that poor children in Morelia can be set up now, and I know that they would say, oh, it's only a card trading, and it's not the augmented reality area next. It's not the virtual reality stuff next. If you're essentially advocating that play to earn is a viable career opportunity, it's not just going to be the card trading game. I mean, it can't be, because even like UNICEF is saying that a new educational model is virtual reality headsets, and those are being piloted in Chile as well. So, you're really going to try to like carve out a tiny slice to justify that what you're doing is safe, knowing that the trajectory of the whole thing is incredibly unsafe and dangerous. So, I mean, the other thing is, like, surprise, surprise, predatory finance, right? Predatory money situation. So Roblox, it's a free game, but then if you link it to your parents' money, right, or your Bitcoin wallet, that you can over purchase, right? And kids don't have any understanding of value and costs. And so they're buying things for their avatars, right? They're buying in-game things. And this is being encouraged through the online education behavior management program, so that training children through this PBIS systems and the Class Dojo systems to strive in this very behaviorist way towards certain social behaviors to earn tokens and points that will be useful in the metaverse for their avatars. But it's not just behavioral script, because once you link it to your credit, that whether it's your personal credit or your family's credit, then that becomes predatory, and that's done on purpose. That doesn't just happen, oops, by accident. That is part of the mechanics of the system. So again, this is just revisiting, children are sovereign, and if they want to make a living, they should, by whatever means they choose, so long as it is consensual. Is that radical? The sovereign part, parental rights. When I was doing my research around adverse childhood experiences, Scotland is being targeted as the first ACEs aware nation. About 5 years ago, they passed a law where they were actually assigning a non-family member minder to every child born that was not of their family, to keep an eye on them for the state. Now, that was eventually rolled back as against their constitution, but it took quite a while. And so, while I agree with what Derek has said about children being state property, undermining parent rights and control over their children is also a huge problem. And I think there's been a number of sensational cases, many of which like connected to health, medical kidnapping, those sorts of things, that try to erode family rights. But I think that's because we have such a ripped up, shredded social system, community system. Like, we have no communities anymore that are held accountable for kids, giving them what they need and keeping them safe. And like, clearly the whole reason I'm here having this conversation is I'm trying to keep kids safe and trying to hold adults, like, to tell them in advance what's coming so that we can do our jobs, because children they can't do it for themselves. And these policies that are happening around the world, and again, in the cloud-based world, they get one pilot up, and then just like ALEC or these other bill mills, like even in different countries, they get it in place and then they expand it throughout. That's part of what the Bloomberg What Works government model is about, what these different global things are about. I mean, they'll paint it as sustainable or equitable or just or about, caring for children, but it is none of those things. So again, when Katherine Austin Fitz wants to talk about the vaccine passports, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. It's not just the phone, because we know that ultimately the plan is biosensor data that we won't be interfacing with the phone. It will be, chips, seed, nanotechnology, that sort of thing. Is that the learning economy, the self-sovereign identity, which I have the arrow shows, that language again, is about you can be sovereign on your phone. Look how free you are on your phone. We are tracking you. We are tracking your educational credentials so that AI can tell you what your work is. We are tracking your social credit. Isn't it great to be tracked in the metaverse? And as you said, in terms of privacy, there's already a backend that's been built, which is by MIT. It was called Enigma Protocol. It's now called the Secret Network, and it allows querying on encrypted data. So it may be quote unquote technically anonymous, but it will be used to score you and your economic outputs and your compliance in regards to these social impact deals. So learning economy is huge. We see the Futurist Gaming panel, the gentleman that was running the World Economic Forum video. He was with the Entertainment Software Association. This is from 2017, where they were doing a whole hour-long video with the woman. Her name is Constance Steinkuhler. She was the woman who came to Philadelphia the year before. And they talk about the future is gaming, the transformative power of video games as a platform for education, health, and social impact. Okay? So we know this is coming. If they're targeting kids in Mexico as a poverty alleviation program, it's about gaming for social impact. And go back to Afro Games, this is just the image that talks about these children being given a physical trainer and a psychologist. And those two images together are very clear that they are tracking those kids as social impact commodities. And you can see they're just being lined up in warehouses to play games in the metaverse. So Tim Draper, one step removed from the Blockchain Founders Fund. I think he is invested in the Blockchain Founders Fund. This is a tweet from yesterday, I believe, actually. And we know that the crypto colonization program is going full bore in El Salvador right now. It's a little bit odd that Tim Draper is congratulating the president on his social prescribing campaign, right? Nayib Bukele is saying our new ad campaign to help prevent COVID-19 deaths and hospitalizations. Now, I've been speaking since the very beginning that everything was going to be about preventative health and wellness markets. These are social prescribing markets, right? And so he is linking the social prescribing and health outcomes to tokenized behavior and Bitcoin, all right? On the other side, we see youth social prescribing. We're going to manage the youth through our social prescriptions, and that's like Thrivecast and your phone. You get a pathway, you're told what to do, and you better do it, and we're going to track you if you do or don't, and it's all logged because you're in the metaverse, you're in mixed reality, you're in the spatial web. So again, this is Ali Majhavi, who is the managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund, but he is also a limited partner with Draper Goren Holm. And Draper Goren Holm is the blockchain venture studio and fund created by Tim Draper, okay, with a focus on incubating the metaverse. So we are finally at an end after 3 hours. I'm so sorry, Jason. But this is from our visit to Austin, which is auspicious. Again, the Greater Reset 3 is paired between Texas and Mexico. It is framed as freedom. But I think what we're looking at is we need to understand that it is under the dome, and that dome is running in the metaverse on blockchain. And that blockchain system that runs the metaverse is fundamentally about the CIA and In-Q-Tel. And so this is from when the three of us with Lynn Davenport, we were at the Texas Blockchain Summit with our wonderful brochure, our Nephi brochure that Raul Diego helped us with. And we were doing an interview and someone was walking by, so I engaged them with the question of the day. This is the question of the day that we will end with. And I will just say, if you don't want to live in the CIA's video game, why should the children of Morelia? Why should we be okay with that? Is that what our freedom comes at that cost? Do we want to live in the CIA's video game? Question. Question of the day. Question of the day. Yeah. Do we have an option? We can all still say no. I will just, in closing, if you've stuck with us for this long, thank you very much. I hope you can tell that my intentions for this are about looking to the future that's being built for these children and questioning the entire premise of free market digital labor, and that children being digital workers who can give consent to participate in blockchain smart contracts and gaming as digital commodities. And knowing that that space is a militarized space, knowing that it's linked to very powerful global financial interests. As someone who is a citizen of Philadelphia that is incubating this monstrous stuff, I feel like I need to tell you. And I don't expect that everybody knows this. I really don't expect that anybody else knows this. I'm probably one of the only people in the world who knows it, and that's why I have to say it. And there's still time. Like if you found my approach too direct, that's fair. I'm not subtle. I'm pretty direct. I'm pretty sharp with my critique. But when you know better, you do better. And my intention with this is that we know better and that we do better, and that there's still a chance to make it right. There's still a chance to say, Splinterlands, the stuff with Draper, the stuff with having blockchain wallets and linking it in with, hosting people who are building the metaverse with state intelligence. Like, that's starting to feel not comfortable to me. Like, that's not what I thought I signed up for. And that's okay. We can always backtrack and make different choices. It's been a little hard for me this week because in this space, I think it tends to be about personality. It tends to be about celebrity culture. Just in closing, I'm doing this because I feel that I have an obligation to do. I don't think that most of you are aware of what's happening. I don't know why this came to me to be the one to try to tell people, but I can't turn my back on it. And it's very hard. It's hard on my family. But I don't feel like I have a choice to look the other way. So I'm doing this. People have asked, why don't you go on Derek Bros? That they keep throwing that out. Derek asked you to be on the Greater Reset. And why won't you go debate him on this? And what I'm saying is that I feel like we're living in two fundamentally different realities. And a lot of these online platforms are about spectacle. They're about creating emotionality. They're about generating profit. They're about generating emotional engagement, celebrity media culture. That's not my thing. And so I think personally, if people call me that I'm breaking up the movement, that I'm divisive, I feel unity for me is overrated. Okay. My job is that people get clear on the issues and that they hopefully stand on their principles. I think as adults, that's what we need to be doing. Get clear and be principled and stick with it, even when it's hard. That unity is not my top priority. I'm not actually in anybody's movement. I never joined any movement. Okay. Just to be clear, I'm not in anybody's movement. I'm not a leader of a movement. I'm sharing my experience. My path is to do this thing, to try to tell the story. And I believe in that people are capable. Anybody who imagines the Freedom Cell movement should understand that people are capable, right? I believe that you can look at all the facts presented by all the sides and decide what you think about it. Now, I may not like what you end up deciding, right? I may disagree with it. But if you come at it from a principled place and you have done the work and you've been honest with yourself about it, then that's okay. Then that's that, right? Then we know how to proceed moving forward. And if your differences of opinion, for example, on this child labor issue, the child sovereignty issue, are so different from mine, we won't be walking the same path. It doesn't mean that I'm going to try to throw mud on you just to be a mean person. The clarity, once we have clarity, then we can proceed, right? Don't just consume content, not my content, not anybody's content. Do your own work, right? Don't do spectacle. Really be cautious about attention token economies, because that's the whole thing that we're fighting. That's the whole thing that's feeding the AI. And when people say, well, why didn't you go on the Greater Reset? I would say, in my opinion, your character reflects who you spend your time with, who you are affiliated with. When they say, who are your people? Who are your people? And then by your people, that's how they judge. Now, sometimes you make decisions, and in retrospect, your understanding of the person or the group was not what you thought it was, right? And then you reposition, right? Today, I actually removed my interview with Katherine Fitz. because I found that at this point, her decision to proceed the way she conducted herself with waffling was not in alignment with my values, right? I'm not making a big deal about it. I'm just saying, like, at this point, it's not in alignment. I'm making this break. I'm making a change in decision. If maybe she will change her position, and that's okay, because we're all human. We're all human, and we all have, none of us are perfect, right? And we proceed, all right? Our humanity is what we would value in all of this. But if you start to mishmash with all sorts of other people, it gets confusing. I will say the same thing is happening with people who are in terrain theory, who are mixing it up with people who are promoting bioweapons and genocides. It's confusing to people. I would contend it's supposed to be confusing to people. And we need to do better. And that's what I'm trying to do. Nobody is entitled to me. I choose how I engage. And choose how I engage with people in this space. It's not perfect. It's a militarized space. Yes, the internet is a militarized space. I'm not your product, and I don't actually owe you anything. I owe things to people that I actually am in true relationship with, that I have connections to, and I'm not always perfect in that regard either, but I'm gonna try. And if I do badly, I would expect for someone to lovingly check me and tell me to, like, do better. Okay? So my decision to not join into some sort of debate scenario, you respect that. If you respect my work, expect my decision to do that. And I just think, in closing, that protecting children, especially vulnerable children, that's top of list priority, right? If we are building a resistance movement to a biosecurity state, to cyborg avatar capitalism, to hive mind consciousness, to the internet of bio-nano things, protect the kids first. Like, be a grown-up about it and protect the children. If you can't protect the children, if you can't protect all the children, we're not on the same road. We're just not on the same road. So that's all I got.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Alison, for doing this. And I do think it's important. And honestly, like, I'm not interested in this, in engaging in this, the fighting and it's, the efforts to turn it into a personality thing. And I want people to focus on the issues. It doesn't matter whether you like Derek or you like Alison or me or whatever. And that's nice, but that's really what we need to be doing, is talking about these issues. And this could have been, and it is actually, it's an opportunity to talk about the issues, even though it seems Derek wants to sidestep that. The fact of the matter is, what is the position on this? And his position is clear. And that's what we need to be having a discussion about, like whether or not that's something we support or not. And hopefully, people will watch this video and get away from this personality fighting shit and actually talk about the issues, because that's what really matters. So I'm glad that we did this. Thank you so much, Alison. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jason.